you got to have a bucket of money for the roads, a bucket of money for the electric gate that keeps breaking once a month, or little Johnny ran into the front gate. You got to repair the front gate.
Whose fault is that?
Whose fault is that? Who's going to pay for it?
Yeah.
So it gets into again. So I have to get on Zoom meetings and I have to deal with committees.
Yeah.
Whereas 15, 20, 25 years ago, I never had that experience. I dealt with one person, and we have literally found deer as the sun comes up. There's dead deer, and so we'll land the helicopter, and the buzzards aren't even on them yet because they died overnight. Perfectly healthy animal, fat, robust. Doesn't matter if it's a buck or a doe, but they're laying there. Their legs are still tucked underneath them. Maybe they fell over sideways and they're laying on their side. But the key there is there's no kicking, there's no struggling, there's no thrashing. Obviously, there's no blood.
Yeah.
Nowadays, there's a lot of different drugs. There's a lot better darting guns, darting material, and a lot more skill set involved. And so the darting is much more easier on the animal, easier on the human, safer, but again, it's still time, cost, skill set involved. And so you don't have to have the big $200,000 handling facility or whatever it costs, the big fancy facility. You can literally dart 100 deer in an afternoon if you have the proper skill set. The timing of screwworm right now could not be worse. The peak fawning date in Zavala County is July 15th.
Okay.
In other words, that's when the majority of the fawns hitting the ground. So in June, they're going to start hitting the ground. And so the timing could not be any worse from that perspective. And that's how it works. It takes out all your production or the majority of your production first, being the fawns.
Welcome to the Landowner Insider, the podcast for Texas landowners who want to stay up to date with current events shaping our state. Here we talk about issues that actually impact your Texas lands, markets, water, wildlife, policy, and the decisions that are shaping our state. I'm your host, Kasey Mock with the Mock Ranches Group. And in each episode, we sit down with the people who are shaping the future of Texas. We're not afraid to ask the hard questions. This is the Landowner Insider podcast presented by the Mock Ranches Group.
Today we've got Macy Ledbetter, owner of wildlife biologist at Spring Creek Outdoors. Macy and I have known each other for, professionally for 10 years or so. It's been a few years since I've seen you. So
Yes, sir.
I appreciate you coming in today. Today is June, what is today? June the 4th? Be one of the busier days of your career, maybe.
Yes, sir. I believe it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a drive up here. I never heard the radio one time. I was on the phone nonstop.
Yeah, not because of this episode. Yesterday, June the 3rd, 2026, the first confirmed case of the new World Screwworm was confirmed in South Texas, Zavala County, right outside of La Pryor.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. A day that may live in infamy, which is a famous quote by a president. And I think that date's going to be remembered for a long time. I really do.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we got that to contend with. Macy and I are going to really dig into the screwworm. We're going to talk about chronic wasting disease. We're going to talk about condemnation. Macy's a leader in wildlife-related issues, landowner issues, advocate for landowners, advocate for wildlife here in the state. And man, our landowners and our wildlife are under attack from a lot of different angles.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That are involved in fragmentation and disease and parasites and legislation and all the things. And so we're going to touch on a lot of that. And I appreciate you making the time to come in.
You bet.
Really
Thank you
do.
for inviting me.
I really do. Let's have some quick background though, Macy. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Tell us about yourself.
You bet. I was born and raised in San Saba, Texas.
Okay.
About an hour and a half from here. Family ranch has been in the family. I'm the 5th generation. It was settled in 1906. So I'm real proud of that fact. We're a member of the Family Land Heritage Award.
Yes, sir.
For 100 plus years of family ownership and management. So we live on the family ranch. Very proud of that fact. I came over here to Tarleton for a couple of years. I graduated in 1987 from high school in San Saba. Came over here to Tarleton back when Tarleton did not have a wildlife program. It was obviously strong animal husbandry, animal science, that kind of stuff. And being 90 miles from home, I thought, boy, that was pretty convenient. So I came over here to Tarleton and freshman, sophomore year, and I ran out of classes because I wanted to be a wildlife biologist. I wanted to be a biologist, and Tarleton got me halfway there.
Yes, sir.
They just did not have the degree plan at the time. So I took all the cool classes, and I literally ran out of classes. So I applied for Texas A&M and College Station. Well, I wasn't sure I was going to get in. My grades, I didn't come over here to be valedictorian, and I wasn't valedictorian.
Neither did I when I came
for
to
the
Tarleton.
record, I was not even in the running for valedictorian, so I didn't even try. So I filled out that application. I had to put my GPA on paper, and I thought, oh, Lord, I need to be thinking about a plan B here at this point, So I licked that stamp. This was stamp days, right? It's none of this electronic stuff. So I licked the stamp. I said a prayer. I put it in there. And about 3-4 weeks later, I got the letter in the mail from College Station. And I thought, I didn't even open it at first. I didn't have a lot of high hopes. And in fact, it came to my parents' house in San Saba while I was here. And they called and told me about it. And I said, I'll be home in, next week or whatever. So I wasn't too worried about it because I just didn't feel good about it, knowing my track record here at Tarleton. And so I finally went home, 10 days later, 2 weeks later, and I opened that letter, and I almost fell to the floor. The very first word said, congratulations. And I thought, is this a joke? I just didn't believe it. So anyway, God takes care of the misspoken sometimes.
Yes, sir.
So anyway, so got accepted A&M. I left Tarleton in 89, and I went to A&M and finished up my degree there. Just a quick story. I'd never even been to College Station. I applied for it. Had never been there, never seen it. So the first day I drove over there to move in. First day I drove on campus, I got a ticket. And so I'd been on campus maybe 3 minutes, and I got to meet one of the bicycle cops.
Okay.
And forgot to wear, or I didn't wear my seatbelt. We were growing up, that's when Texas was the first, you had a seatbelt law, right? But I didn't participate, Again, I wasn't the valedictorian. I already said that, right? And so I was on the A&M campus for, just a couple of minutes, and I got a $94 ticket for not wearing a seatbelt. So that's how my college career started.
$94 in 1989 was some money.
I tell you what, I had to go get a job, and I didn't have $94 to spend. So anyway, that was a welcome to College Station that I don't refresh. I don't appreciate that. And now, tickets to the football game, $500, $600, $700, $800. Yeah. So, wasn't that long ago. That was, like say, 88 or so. I was there, and $94 was a lot of money. And now it won't even get you a parking pass to a football game.
Well, they got to pay for that NIL money somehow.
Exactly. I'm glad to be out of that loop. Yeah. So I graduated in 92 with a wildlife management, wildlife ecology degree from A&M.
Okay.
And the reason I did that, Kasey, is because, like I say, I wanted to be a biologist, and all of my mentors and all that at the time, they had graduated from A&M because, again, that was one of the few colleges that offered wildlife management. It's not like today, where you have a lot of different colleges, including Tarleton, that now offers a wildlife-related degree. Back in the day, my mentors and that generation in front of me, there was only a handful of colleges that offered wildlife, so they all said, you got to go to A&M. So I kind of believed it, and I just went to A&M because that's what, when your mentors tell you to do something, you're foolish not to heed their warning. So I did that. So I had never seen 40,000 people in my life living in San Saba, Texas. And so when I went to College Station, there's 40,000 people at the time. Now it's more than double that, but at the time. So it was a little bit of a culture shock for me. So when I graduated, I got out of there as quick as I could because that was the biggest city I'd ever lived in, ever been involved in. And, again, just a little old hill country boy from northern San Saba, I couldn't wait to get out of College Station. And I still remember that that seatbelt tickets. I couldn't wait to get out of there. But anyway, it was a dream come true. I fought through college, and I'd been in a class from say Tarleton here. Class size was maybe 20, 25 people. You go to College Station, and it would be 40 to 200. Again, there's a little bit of a culture shock for a little country boy, But anyway, graduated in 92. And shortly thereafter, I got a job at Texas Parks and Wildlife in South Texas. And that was my lifelong goal, was to be a wildlife biologist working particularly with white-tailed deer, and particularly in South Texas because that's where the bigger deer were at.
Were you a regional biologist or on a WMA or what county?
Both. At that time, it was a district biologist. I had 5 counties, or regulatory biologists is what they were called. So I had 5 counties, all involving around Georgia West, 3 Rivers, and Tilden. And then there's a James Daughtry Wildlife Management Area that surrounded Choke Canyon Reservoir. Yep. So I was an area manager because that was just kind of a small WMA. It was not full-time staffed. So myself and one other technician were considered part-time staff on the WMA, and then we worked full-time on those 5 counties. So I had what they call dual roles. They don't do that anymore, but back in the day, that was commonplace. So I had part of WMA and public hunting experience. We ran about 300 to 330 public hunters through the public draw system that Parks and Wildlife offers. And that was a really great learning experience for me personally, because again, I had not been around public hunting. I had not traveled out of state, did the out-of-state draws. I just didn't have that experience. So it was a wonderful experience for me to deal with 330 public hunters on, quote, public lands that I managed.
Did you ever know Jeff Gunnels?
Oh, I knew him very well. Went to college with him.
Did you really?
Yeah. Jeff and I, same classmates. Yeah, very good guy.
My son and I, we drew the big-time Texas hunts on the Gus Engling WMA 2 or 3 years ago, and went out. So they only give one of those per WMA. There's 5 of them a year that get to do that particular hunt. They shut down the whole entire WMA.
Right.
The staff was wonderful. Jeff was awesome.
They catered to you.
Oh man, it was great. He's a great cook. And we stayed there at the WMA in the cabins, and the hunting was fantastic.
Fantastic.
It was really a great experience.
Yeah. So Jeff and I are the same cohort, same age class, and I think he just recently retired.
He did. I spoke with him last week on the phone.
Oh, did you?
Had a good
Tell him I said hello,
I'll
Jeff.
tell him. Maybe he'll hear this.
Yeah. I haven't seen him in a while, but we're good friends and we're classmates.
Oh, he's a wonderful
Small
guy.
world.
Wonderful guy. How about that?
So did you get a deer?
I didn't. So I wanted to hunt one with a bow. And the first afternoon we walked. I've never been in a climbing stand, where you ratchet yourself up the tree. So we asked him what to do. There was no feeders and blinds or anything. They'd been hand corning some stuff. My son was going to rifle hunt. I wanted to bow hunt. They'd had a big deer working a scrape line. It's like hunting the Midwest. I mean, you're hunting a scrape line, really. And they said, take a climber in there. I was like, well, I don't have a climber. Well, they had one. So how do I use it? So I set the climber up in the parking lot at the WMA, and I climbed the telephone pole. And they said, okay, here's how you do it. So I took the climber in and took a little hand saw and found the tree. I found the scrape line, found the tree. I ratcheted myself up in the climbing stand, and get my bow ready. And not too much longer, that deer comes out. He was mid 170s kind of a deer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, big deer. He's real smart. They knew where his bedding area was. It was behind me. And I had a scrape. There was a fence line, and there was a scrape here and the scrape here, right and left of me. And I could shoot both scrapes.
Oh, wow. Perfect setup.
Perfect setup.
Yeah.
But the way the wind was blowing, the deer came to the left-hand scrape. I was hoping he came to the right one and passed in front of me. He came to the left-hand scrape. The wind wasn't perfect. He would have had to walk about 20 feet. He'd had to walk about 20 feet with the wind at his back to get to that scrape. And those old deer, I've hunted elk all over the country. I've hunted deer my whole life. And those old ones, that's what keeps them alive, is they will not take 2 steps with the wind at their back.
That's right.
They won't do it. And that deer came out, and there was a big post oak tree, I believe is what it was, that was covered. I could see his tail head and I could see his head. And if I had a muzzle loader, a bow, a shotgun, a rifle, I could have killed him a bunch of times. But with a bow, I couldn't, because I couldn't see his vitals.
Yeah.
And he stood there for 2 or 3 minutes, probably just
that's the longest 2 or 3 minutes of your life.
Yeah, licking his nose and staring at that scrape, and then he turned and walked up the fence. That's the last time we saw him. He probably knew we were in there at that point.
Yeah.
And last time we saw him, 105 days. Saw him on camera 2 or 3 times more, and never saw him. I didn't kill a deer. My son killed a real nice deer.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, there's a reason you never saw a fat Indian, right? Yeah. So that bow hunting's tough.
Yeah. My grandfather was a hunting guide his whole life in the mountains, and he hated bow hunters. He said if bows were any good, the cowboys wouldn't be here.
That's right. We wouldn't be here today. Yeah, that's right. So. We had archery hunts on the WMA, and it was always an interesting time when the public bow hunters showed up.
Yes, sir.
For the next 2 weeks, I picked up several skulls. I'll just leave it at that.
Picked up skulls and, all kinds of things.
Fed the buzzards well for a couple of weeks. Yes, sir.
Macy, what do you think the biggest challenges are facing these Texas land and wildlife managers, owners here in our state today? I mean, that's gonna take us a lot of ways, obviously, but what do you think the biggest challenges are over your career that you've seen emerge?
That's a great question. It's going to be hard to narrow it down, but it just seems like every year or 2 or 3, there's some big issues. Big issues where changing in the tax laws, big issues of a disease or an issue. Of course, you got rising cost, labor cost. We can talk about that later in some detail because I think that's a worthy conversation. But it's just the onslaught, the changing times, where back in the day, I think it was more about raising livestock, and it was a little
The deal
easier.
was secondary for a long time.
That's right. It was a little easier, I think. Not physically. They worked harder, no doubt about that. But I'm just saying, I think you had fewer distractions, fewer restrictions, fewer regulations. It was just less complicated. You just go out there and put on your boots and work your butt off and get your product and go home. Nowadays, you can work your butt off and still fail because they're changing the rules, regulations, the situations, the scenarios are changing most of the time without your involvement and out of your control. So it's very hard to write a business plan, for example.
Yeah, very
Sit down
hard.
and write a 5-year business plan. Man, you might want to write a 30-day business plan because, again, in 31 days, something's going to change beyond your control. So it's really hard to navigate that industry or navigate any business plan that you have so little input and control of that affects your bottom dollar. And so I think that's what I'm seeing. I've been blessed to be in this industry, again, since the late 80s, early 90s. I got to watch it grow, from high fences to property size, prices, obviously, real estate prices, all of that stuff. But the complexity and the difficulty has just been tenfold, if you would.
Yeah.
Seems like every decade there's another level of complexity adding on to landowners. And, we can talk about the age of the average landowner, the size of the land holdings. It's not rocket science. It's getting harder, and people are getting out, and habitat fragmentation, landholder size. And I think that's a big driving force. It's just getting way more complicated, way more complex. But I think the answer to your question is landowners have less and less control, and that's what it takes to be successful. Is you have to manage, you have to control, you have to predict in front of you, AKA a business plan, and it's hard to do in a ranching environment.
Yeah, it is tough. How many clients do you work for currently?
According to my QuickBooks, we have about 625 clients.
Wow.
Now that changes because, we have deaths, we have divorces, we have ranches selling, but then also we have new people coming on, new ranches, but then we have ranches that are getting subdivided. So we might have a 10,000 acre ranch, it's one client. Well, he dies and it goes to the different parts of the family. Now we have 5 clients. There are 5 individual unique clients with 5 different sets of goals and objectives. Now it's 5 different surveys, but last year it was 1. So again, 625, and that's not a hard number. By the time I get home today, it could be 627. It could be 618. Because again, death, divorce, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But these ranches are evolving, and in my perspective, they're getting smaller. That's no secret. And so they're getting more technical. It's easier to manage a larger ranch. The numbers are bigger. You have to shoot more deer. You spend more time, but you're dealing with 1 or 2 people or maybe one entity. But as these ranches get smaller, the ownership, the LLC, the LPs, the business partners, the partnerships, the family is getting involved. And so where I used to work with, say, 1 or 2 landowners or maybe a married couple, now I'm working with attorneys, CPAs, CEOs, and all the associations. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So there's some ranches, Kasey, that I have 10 bosses. And they all have to approve it or they all have to vote on it. I have one ranch in particular has 42 family members, 42. It's a limited partnership, and we have a family meeting once a month, and it's literally a democracy vote. They vote to pay the bills. They vote to order protein. They vote to repaint the house, and they divide the bills by 42. So I got 42 bosses on one ranch. You can imagine the complexity to that. And that's, historically you had one landowner, one decision, one phone call, one text. Now I have 42.
I walked into a listing appointment one time. This has been 10 years ago, down in Wallace, Texas on the river. Walked in, it was just myself. I'll never make this mistake again. Walked in just myself. There's 15 family members there, and they were all in the living room. sitting against the wall, and there was a chair in the middle. Which chair do you think was mine? So I'm sitting here. I'm having to turn around, to present this listening presentation.
And 6 questions at one time.
Oh my
you don't even know where to look.
They didn't. None of them agreed, because some of them are retired and some are still working, and some have savings and some don't. So there was.
Yeah.
They couldn't agree on anything.
Yeah.
What they wanted for the ranch, how soon they needed to sell it or wanted to sell it. Some didn't want to sell it at all.
That's right.
Couldn't agree on anything.
Some are 21 years old, some are 84.
Yes, sir.
And so you're just not going to get that together.
100%.
Yeah. And so unfortunately, we're at that point. I have quite a few clients where these ranches get subdivided. They high fence the ranch. Let's just say it's 2,000 acres. They high fence 2,000 acres, and then they go and sell 125 acre tracts.
Inside.
Yeah. So it's still a 2,000 acres of captive wildlife, but each property owner owns, let's say, 100, 125 acres. Now, you can't fence your property. This is kind of a socialism ranching type scenario. Yeah. And so, again, now I usually work with a committee in that, there'll be a wildlife management committee or a management type committee.
Yeah, like a POA. But
it's a POA, but it's out in the country, and so I can write a wildlife management plan for that 2,000 acres and then let the committee worry about the minutia of, appointing each acreage or each ownership. We'll fly it with a helicopter or a thermal drone or whatever, and we'll say, okay, you need to shoot, $20 and 40 does. Now, I don't care who shoots them. That's up to the committee.
Up to them.
Yeah, that's up to the management. And some of those ranchers or those parcel owners are not hunters. Some of them are even anti-hunters, to be honest with you. Now, with COVID, we have a lot of out-of-state people moving in. They buy into that because they believe the advertisement that it was easy and you get the benefit of 2,000 acres when you only own 100 acres, that kind of stuff. And so who's going to shoot the deer? Who's going to feed the deer? Who's going to fill the feeders? Who's going to repair the broken water trough? And so it's kind of a socialism experiment.
Who's going to blade the roads after the rain?
That's right. So now you got to have a bucket of money for the roads, a bucket of money for the electric gate that keeps breaking once a month, or little Johnny ran into the front gate. You got to repair the front gate.
Whose fault is that?
Whose fault is that? Who's going to pay for it?
Yeah.
So it gets into again. So I have to get on Zoom meetings and I have to deal with committees.
Yeah.
Whereas 15, 20, 25 years ago, I never had that experience. I dealt with one person, maybe the couple, but we make a decision pretty quick. Maybe by phone call or a site visit, and have, coffee and cake, in a couple hours, we make some decisions and move on down the road. But with this socialism aspect or this multi-partnership, rarely does anything happen instantly. It might take a couple of Zoom meetings and dozens of emails. And to your point, you're dealing with 20-year-old ownerships and 80-year-old ownerships, and their goals and objectives are very far apart. Yeah. And their financial situation is very far apart. And then we haven't even talked about, say, the Eagleford. I was did a lot of work in the Eagleford, pre-Eagleford, and again, working with one landowner. And then because of wealth management and taxes and the way they had to restructure ownership and funding because of Eagleford and that kind of stuff, it changed everything.
Yeah, those that don't know, the Eagleford was a big shale play, oil and gas shale play in South Texas 15, 20 years ago, I guess, is when it really kicked off good, 15 years ago. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah. And it went from, I had clients living in very nice double-wide trailer houses with a front porch and 2 cars to now they have, $7 million house with a swimming pool and, just overnight riches because maybe their predecessors bought or just kept their minerals. And pre-Eagleford, it wasn't that big of a deal. It was nice mailbox money, but it didn't support you at all. It would allow you to some flexibility. Then all of a sudden Eagleford showed up and they became multi-millionaires every month. Yeah. I've got some clients that are making millions of dollars every 30 days. It's pretty amazing. And it's life-changing money. It's generational type money. And so in doing that with financial planners and all that, you have to set things up a little differently and play the tax game and all that. And so it changes ownership, it changes strategy, it changes management, it changes priorities. And so we had to deal with that. And from just sitting here today talking about white-tailed deer and management, it's not always been positive. Some of it has been because we can take that money now and target something specific, like drill a new, Carrizo water well and run 12 miles of water. Okay, that cost $300,000. Pre-Eagleford, it was just a dream. You couldn't even, it wasn't even a consideration.
Wasn't even an option to do.
Yeah, it was stupid money. Who would spend $300,000 on a water well? Well, with Eagleford money and $1 million paycheck every month, it became cheap. And so we would drill 2 of them, and we would put in 12-inch water lines, and we're putting 300 gallons a minute down the pipeline with a twist of a valve. That's generational changing wealth. So from that regard, or let's just say we build a 25-acre lake. Instead of your 1-acre pond that always silted up and your fish died because your cows got in it and the drought dried it up, now we can build a 25-acre lake that costs you $500,000 or $750,000, and we can maintain it full. And now we have 8-pound trophy bass because of the Eagleford. Yeah. So we're raising 8-pound bass in a 25-acre lake because you had mineral rights.
Do you work on the fisheries side also?
We do a lot.
Do you
yes,
really?
sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. And as these properties getting smaller, fisheries are becoming more important.
They are very much so.
Yeah, especially younger generation. They're not maybe as much into hunting as, say, you and I were growing up, or your property won't support a lot of hunting opportunity because it's getting smaller, or maybe your grandfather cleared it all, root plowed it all, put it in hay meadows or whatever. It's just not a good piece of property for say, trophy white-tailed deer, for example. But we can dig a pond, we can engineer a pond, and we can grow some trophy bass, catfish, whatever, trout. We've got places in the hill country where we put trout, rainbow trout.
We put trout in the spring, in the fall.
Yeah.
Let them live. They'll typically live if you have good flows, depending on how cold it is, November to, March.
Yeah, it just depends. Hard to predict. Yeah. But
maybe to April.
Trout in Llano and Gillespie County and Kerr County is pretty amazing.
Pretty awesome.
So we do a lot of fisheries all the way from the designing of the project to recommending contractors and working with the contractors to the stocking of the fish, aeration, feeders, the whole thing. Yeah.
What about exotics? When you started, the exotics were not as big a deal as they are today.
That's exactly right. It was the axis and the black buck and just the aoudad sheep, the common stuff, right? And so as evolution does, things evolve. The high fences became more popular. Now we can talk about that for several reasons. As the land holdings got smaller, the goals and objectives among landowners became different. Well, they became obvious. So a high fence, think of it as this way. A high fence is a public declaration that you and I, the landowners, don't agree. Like we have different goals and objectives. So if I want to grow 7-year-old trophy age class bucks and you want to churn and burn and just shoot a bunch of deer, well, we couldn't be further apart because I can't grow a 180-inch deer if you're shooting them at 3 years old. I've got to get 5, 6, 7, 8 years old on mine. So I'm going to put up a high fence. So anybody driving down the highway and they see that high fence, they know this factually. You and I have different goals and objectives. So a high fence is a public declaration of 2 landowners having different goals and objectives. Nobody's right, nobody's wrong. It's just that these 2 people have agreed to disagree. So somebody puts up a high fence. Then there's some parks and wildlife deer management permits that require a higher fence. So if maybe you didn't want a high fence, but you want to utilize breeder deer or you want to utilize triple T permits, which are now null and void, but they were very, very active early on, very popular.
Trap and transport,
or DMP. You have to, by regulation, have a high fence. So again, you may not have wanted a high fence, but now because you want to reach your goals and objectives, you have to high fence. So in a weird sense, Parks and Wildlife was promoting, was encouraging, and even mandating, if you're going to use these permits, you have to build a high fence. So in the late 90s and early 2000s, you saw an explosion of high fences. High fence builders, high fence companies. Now they're everywhere. But back in the day, 20 years ago,
they weren't.
In the yellow pages, because that's back when we had yellow pages, there was 2, 3, you know what I mean? You knew all the high fence builders. Now you can't keep up with them. And so then because of that and goals and objectives, regulations, state agencies, maybe you even consider chronic wasting disease and other diseases and other issues, the exotics were brought in to expand the hunting season, expand the income potential. And then when chronic wasting disease showed up with all the different regulations and the government oversight and whatever you want to call it, a lot of ranches just didn't want to participate with that. They didn't want, quote, big government in my business telling me what to do because white-tailed deer are native game animals. And so they want...
Yeah, in the state of Texas, white-tailed deer, as a native indigenous wildlife species, they're held in public trust. which means they belong to the citizens of the state of Texas.
That's right.
I was helping my son with his hunters and my daughter with their hunter safety course, because here in this office, we're going to host 25 kids Sunday for their hunter safety course.
Fantastic.
TPWE hunter safety course. So I was helping my kids with theirs, and that's one of the questions you have to go through in that coursework is the North American Model for Wildlife Management, animals held in public trust doctrine, all the stuff, So that's why wildlife are so, that's why they're managed different. Indigenous wildlife, white-tailed deer particularly. That's why they're managed so much differently than exotics. It also makes it a strong point of contention, though, because if I've got $1 million invested in this white-tailed deer herd, by gosh, I think I own it.
Right. That's right. And there is a problem. And there's been, I think the Texas Supreme Court ruled on it that you don't own them. We all own them, yet nobody owns them. It's kind of one of those deals. But yeah, there was a lawsuit a while back where, private property of native game animals, and it was shot down. So the law is very clear to your point. We all own them, but nobody owns them. And so, again, there was people that didn't want to have that burden on them saying that, I put up a high fence, I have all this infrastructure, I have all these employees, and yet tomorrow or maybe later this afternoon, the government, air quotes, can change their mind and change my whole operation. And so again, I'm losing control. I can't set a 5-year business plan. I can't set a 5-minute business plan because I can't control what I don't own. See what I mean? I can't manage sometimes what I don't own. So in comes the exotics. And it's not just the common exotics, the scimitar, horned oryx, the three amigos. The Exotic Wildlife Association did a fantastic job of educating the public about endangered species and private property, and how individuals in the Exotic Wildlife Association was able to get those animals kept off the endangered species list.
Scimitar, addax, and
Dama gazelle.
There you go.
The three amigos is what they're collectively called. And so, the federal government wanted them on the endangered species list, put them on the endangered species list, and it took a giant effort to get them off and keep them off. And that really was a turning point in the industry. Again, you had a little bit of chronic wasting disease. You just had, government oversight. You just had a lot of things happening at that perfect time being, just a buzzword. And people are like, I don't want to do this. I want to get into exotic animals, where the exotic animals, as you've covered very well in recent Animal Health Commission discussions, that animal health has oversight over the exotic animals, but they're still considered private property.
Correct.
Like cattle, like horses, like goats. So you can hunt them year-round. You can sell them year-round, and you can hunt them in almost any manner that you wish. You can hunt them at night. You can hunt them in the daytime. You can hunt them in the summer. You can hunt them in the winter. You can rope them. You can trap them. You can shoot them from a helicopter. You can do anything you want to. So that was very attractive to a lot of people. So again, you don't have a lot of government oversight outside of a disease issue. And again, you've done a great job of Texas Animal Health Commission and all the different people that you've had here talking about when a disease outbreak shows up, well, then some of the government agencies step up and they take command, as they should. But outside of a disease outbreak, landowners can do anything they want to with these exotic animals within reason, unless they're endangered species. And, that's a whole other conversation. But even with the endangered species, there's a loose guideline. As long as you follow the guidelines, you can still hunt certain endangered species. You can still sell certain endangered species. Again, there's exclusions, there's permits, but it can be done. And it just requires a little bit of documentation. Whereas on the native species, there's not a whole lot of exceptions out there.
No, there's not.
Pretty hard and fast rules with almost no negotiations.
Yeah. The base of knowledge around exotics and the information pouring into that industry, you're probably familiar with the Wildlife Partners guys and what they're teaching people on cost segregation on the animals. Do your homework there.
That's right.
Do your homework there.
A lot of detail.
Read
the small print. Yeah.
Read the small print, but it is a way for a landowner to further monetize what they're doing. And I think you hit on something earlier, but you might have missed the importance of the success stories of the high fences, because it's a very contentious thing. Some people love them, some people don't. There's a lot of reasons to do them. One, neighbors have different objectives. But two, if you think about let's think about the majority of the state of Texas, if you want to define it, I don't know how you would define a trophy deer today, but people maybe the general public starts really paying attention around a 135-inch deer. You know, like if you just go into Llano County or San Saba County or McMullen County or Edwards County or any of those center parts of the state, you know, kill 135-inch deer, people are taking a picture and great buck.
Right.
No longer do they think that one's got milk on his lips. You can tell he didn't come off of a high fence either, you know.
Right.
But what's the average? How many acres would you predictably need to have in San Saba County to produce a 135-inch deer every year, a mature 135-inch deer every year?
Ooh, that's a great question. And it's a moving target.
It's a moving
hard
target.
to answer.
But 400 or 500 acres probably, something in there, maybe.
I would say 300.
Yeah, 300,
depending on the quality of the habitat.
Yeah, so
and obviously the shape.
Sure. To produce one. Well, I've got 2 kids, and when my kids have kids, they're going to have grandkids. So who doesn't get to shoot one this year?
That's right.
So all of a sudden, we can manufacture a heavier carrying capacity with the high fence and supplemental feed, and now we can introduce exotics, and now we have multiple targets. And just, you know, so one person may tell you, well, you're messing with nature, and the other person may say, well, hey, I want my kids to stay interested in this ranch so they keep it one day, and they've all got to be able to use it. So this is the only way I can allow them to all use it. I need to have more animals.
That's right.
Know? And I'm like very, very, very pro landowner rights on that. If they want to be able to do that and do it within the laws, they should be able to. And I think there's a great,
I am as well.
a great place for it. It's one thing that makes our state unique is you can go to Walmart and you can buy a hunting license, and in most counties you can shoot 5 deer.
That's right.
And you can shoot them on your property, and you don't have to draw tags. And if you want to build a high fence and take care of your deer and have a heavier capacity, you can do that. They're all with all those things, and now we're going to start getting some of these emerging issues that we got in our state. With all those things, just like cramming more people in this city, you're more vulnerable to disease, and you're more vulnerable to parasites, and you're harder on the habitat, and you're harder on the food source. And so then you see things like EHD and CWD and anthrax potentially become more prevalent. What have you seen on those?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a pressure cooker. You know, the more people you add in Stephenville, well, car wrecks are going to go up.
Sure.
Crime's going to go up. You lower the population in Stephenville, all that goes down.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait in line at a restaurant. It's stress. It's competition, but maybe not as a, mano-a-mano fight, but it's competition. So here at lunch, we go to a restaurant. It's going to be crowded. Somebody in there might be sick. We might get sick by eating lunch because we're in a room with 50 strangers. Whereas if it wasn't so crowded, we wouldn't get sick because there's only 20 people in there. You see what I mean? We all have space to breathe and elbow room, and we're not crowded. We're not competing.
Social distancing.
Exactly. Yeah. Social distancing. And that's why we do it at great success. So so animals are no different than you and I getting sick in a crowded restaurant. It's stress, whether it's overtly stress or, purpose stress. So you have a feeder and you have 25 deer. I'm here to testify today, you're creating a very stressful environment. So if 1 or 2 of those animals are compromised, whatever your definition of compromise is, then those other animals are possibly subject to that stress, that compromise. Whereas if only 5 animals visit that feeder, because you have either way more feeders or just fewer animals, is the glass half empty or half full? See what I mean? There's 100 ways of looking at this. But if only 5 animals are at the feeder, all 5 of those animals can take their time. They're not in a rush, and they can get all they want to eat. So their nutritional level, their nutritional plane is going to be maximized. So their ability to get sick, their ability to heal, their ability to recover is greater. But again, conversely, if there's 30 animals at that feeder, nobody there is getting what they need fully. Nobody there is getting all they want. The buffet is empty. Stress is high. Blood pressure is high. Core body temperature is raised. So what is that going to do to breeding chronology? What is that going to do to
more fighting with bugs?
More fighting, more kicking, more everything.
Yeah.
So it's just a pressure cooker environment. And, we got like about 5.3, 5.6 million deer in Texas. There's so many deer in Texas, we can't count them. You ask somebody that's supposed to know, and they say, well, we got about this much. If you've got too many to count, you probably had a problem. And so we have issues with EHD. We have issues with other diseases. And most of the time, generally speaking here, Kasey, most of the time it involves pressure. It involves density. Parks and Wildlife has several permits, and all but one of their permits is how to reduce deer herds. The majority of Parks and Wildlife permits is how to reduce deer herds. And I agree with it. We need to be more liberal with that. We need to have the ability to hunt, harvest, trap, move more deer to where, because Texas is not created equally and balanced, obviously.
Correct.
But some places we have way too many deer. Other places we have very few deer. For example, a more recent example of that would have been the anthrax outbreak in kind of western hill country, Sonora, Ozona.
Down in there.
Yeah, just kind of west of Junction, even Bracketville, all the way down to Del Rio. 2019, we had an outbreak of anthrax, and it was historically the most well-documented, most intense outbreak since records have been kept. And
soil-borne.
It was not a disease.
The right factors, the right weather factors. Right?
More of an environmental contamination, if you would.
Correct.
Yeah. And so it lives in the soil, lives underground, maybe 12 inches deep, and normally everything's cool.
Wet spring after a dry fall, is that right?
That's right. A wet spring, hot, dry fall.
Yeah.
In summer. I should say a wet spring followed by a hot, dry summer.
Okay.
And then those spores come up through the ground and come to the top of the ground. Well, when you say hot, dry summer, that means those animals are eating closer to the ground, so they ingest more of those spores. Now, it's not just one spore and you fall over dead. That's not how it works. There's a point of diminishing return, so they have to pick up enough spores, which means they're eating too close to the ground. Again, because you're in a drought or a dry scenario, and you may have an out-of-balance animal herd, to our earlier conversation. And so, again, you're creating stress. Those animals are eating things they shouldn't be. They're laying on bare dirt when maybe they don't need to be. And so they pick up enough of these spores, and then it kills them. So that particular environmental storm happened in 2019. And in 5 counties, it just wiped out the white-tailed deer, some of the exotics.
We had some ranches listed there. You couldn't find a white-tailed deer.
That's right. Yeah, I flew several large ranches. We would fly in a helicopter 8 hours and count 4 or 5 deer. You know, and we saw it kill audad, feral hogs, axis deer. Oh, yeah. And when it's killing, it's like the drought of 2011. When cedar trees start dying, you need to circle the wagons. But yeah, in 2019, 2020, the anthrax was killing audad, feral hogs, axis deer, things that you would think you couldn't kill them with a ball-peen hammer. Well, anthrax was killing them, and so that was devastating. And unfortunately, not to bring up bad news, you look at what's happening right now in those same areas. We've had a pretty good spring.
Yeah,
and it's now early June. So it's probably going to get hot and dry. So not predicting anything, but just something to be aware of, that anthrax spores come to the surface.
Will that stay there into perpetuity in those soils, in those places?
Yes, and some of these have been documented even over 100 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's not like you can go in and excavate or anything. That's just part of the business.
Yeah, and Texas Parks and Wildlife has maps that show the anthrax zones.
Yes, the historic and the current, and it moves a little bit, but not much.
Yeah, not much.
But it's the intensity that you have to worry about. So you can be in those endemic areas and not have anthrax because it was a light year. Conversely, in a couple of years, you can be in that area and it just wipes you out.
Would small things like feeding up off the ground, so instead of broadcasting your corn to eat off the ground, make them eat out of funnels, does that help?
Absolutely, what really helps is getting in front of it with your animal management, your habitat management. You don't overgraze, don't overstock. Livestock, domestic livestock, wildlife, keep your animals' density low so that you have ground cover. Even when
should you move your feed areas? You've seen some of these places that have had a feeder there for 20 years. It's like a pit.
Big hole,
a big hole. Can you move those feeders around and
either fill that hole up with, say, caliche or gravel,
so
that the animals are not eating off the ground? Because when the corn falls on the ground, we've all seen the deer, they go to lick it up. Well, they're not just picking up the corn.
Yeah,
the corn's laying on the soft dirt, and then they have the dirt on their nose. Well, what do? They lick their nose. So they're eating dirt, which has the soil particles or the spores in it. So I always recommend hauling in caliche soil or gravel, or just moving the feeder over, to your point, 20 yards into fresh ground. So you can get ahead of it by proper stewardship, proper management, keeping as much ground cover on as possible. But like I say, destocking, cattle rotation, all of that stuff is big. But to answer your original question, yes, don't allow your feed to hit the ground, because nobody's going to win in that scenario.
Yeah.
Maybe cut your corn feeders off and feed in troughs, or don't feed at all. Allow those animals to spread out. To our conversation earlier about a crowded restaurant, if it's dry and you have a feeder, well, where's all the animals going to be? They're going to be at the feeder. Maybe you cut your feeders off and instead you install 20 troughs and you hand feed them to spread them out. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So there's a few things you can do.
On our lease, we've got 3 feeders at every setup: protein, corn, cottonseed. Usually 2 corns, protein, and cottonseed at every setup. Only 1 corn outside of the feed pen because the kids like to shoot pigs.
All right.
And I don't want the pigs running my deer off. But I allow the deer to spread out too between 3 places. And then we'll have some timed protein feeders that go off in the middle of pasture where there's not a blind. They go off different times of the day. So it keeps those deer, 2 things, keeps those deer on us. It also keeps them spread out.
Right.
And you see a lot more deer.
See a lot more deer.
A lot more deer.
They want to be relaxed. A white-tailed deer is a hypochondriac, schizophrenic hypochondriac. They won't put their head in a 5-gallon bucket. They won't walk into a closet. You know what I mean? They're absolutely scared of an airplane, of a dove, of a quail. They're a schizophrenic hypochondriac. So if you can spread them out and don't put pressure on them, they'll stay there. They'll be there. They'll stay there. They're more reproductively successful. Animal husbandry 101. Take care of the female body and lower her
stress. Yeah.
All of that stuff. Her conception rates, her fawning, her lactation, her performance, his performance, everything goes across the board by having fewer yet higher quality animals. And that goes across the board. That's animal husbandry 101.
Sure.
Dogs, chickens, deer, moose, it doesn't matter,
Talk real quick about EHD.
So EHD is a little different animal than anthrax. It doesn't come from the spores. It's more environmental, wet conditions. It's a fly, it's a midge, it's a gnat.
Yeah, gnats.
However, the little no-see-ums, the ones that bug you, kind of a deal. And they're attracted to moisture when there is no moisture outside. So as your ponds get lower, let's just talk about earthen ponds, everybody sees that mud ring around the 2 or 3 feet around the water before you get to dry land. It's muddy. That's where they want to be.
Yeah.
And they're awaiting the next victim that comes walking through that mud. So when you see cows, when you see deer with muddy socks on, you better be thinking about EHD, because it's coming, whether you're ready or not, because those animals are having to walk through that mud. And when they do, even when you do it, you should go down there and you'll see the flies come up. Well, you're probably going to keep your mouth closed and you're going to squint your eyes, but the deer don't do that. They have their mouth open, they're breathing through their nose, and those flies come up and get in their mouth, they get in their nose, they get in their eyes, and they're searching for the moisture. And then they lay eggs in that wet, moist, warm, humid environment. And it's basically blood poisoning, for lack of a better.
The H stands for hemorrhaging. I don't know what the E and the D stands for.
Epizootic hemorrhagic disease.
Got it.
And so those animals will usually get away from the ponds. They'll become sick. They'll become
quickly though.
Quickly, they'll become anemic.
See them today, they look healthy. Tomorrow they're dead.
Exactly, that's right. So he leaves the pond because it's not that quick. It's not a gunshot. They don't just fall over dead, but they get a drink of water, they get all that stuff, and they walk over there and they lay down under a shade tree because they don't feel good all of a sudden. They lay down in a natural position, got their legs tucked underneath them, they got their back up against the tree, they're looking downwind, they're all the defensive positions, but now they're dead. There's no fight, there's no struggle, they're not torn apart like predation. So it's very easy to, if you find a fresh one, it's very easy to identify what killed this animal.
You ever skinned one of them?
I've skinned several of them.
Yeah, they look bloodshot all underneath their skin.
That's right.
The
that's
hemorrhage, sub-Q.
Yeah, that's right.
Hemorrhaging,
it looks like they've been hit by a vehicle.
Yeah.
Or you took a baseball bat to them and just beat them up. Yeah. So when you pull the hide off, it's immediately. Now, if you don't want to get nasty, you can just open up their eyelids. And normally on the top side of their eyelids, their eyes will be bloodshot. Like they've been drinking all night. They've been on a bender, right?
Yeah.
You wake up next morning, your eyes are all bloodshot. That's what they look like. Because again, it's the hemorrhaging, to your point, and all those tiny little blood vessels and capillaries in your eyes are very, very sensitive. So probably 8 out of 10 times, all you got to do is open their eyes, move their eyeball around, and when you see a lot of red, bloodshot, look like he's been on a bender, then you don't even have to gut them. And
A lot of people use EHD and blue tongue in the same sentence. Two different things, though.
Two different things, but they're close kissing cousins, So for
Blue
layman's,
tongue's more in sheep.
right. But they're so close, they're so closely related. So it's kind of like you can just roll it off the end of your tongue, and you're not exactly correct, but you're close enough for government work, if you would. And so we do a lot of surveys in late August and early September, talking about helicopter surveys, and we have literally found deer as the sun comes up. There's dead deer, and so we'll land the helicopter, and the buzzards aren't even on them yet because they died overnight. Perfectly healthy animal, fat, robust, doesn't matter if it's a buck or a doe, but they're laying there, their legs are still tucked underneath them. Maybe they fell over sideways and they're laying on their side, but the key there is there's no kicking, there's no struggling, there's no thrashing, obviously there's no blood.
Yeah.
Now with anthrax, a little bit different story. That's a slower death where there's a struggle. They're frailing around, but the telltale sign there is they're bleeding out of all their orifices. And just keep it clean, but got a lot of orifices on an animal, and blood's coming out of all of them, and that blood's not red. That blood is black, almost in a tarry.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's more like a black tarry type substance. So that's when you know you got a problem, because it's anthrax.
Yeah.
But again, that's fairly easy to recognize because it's not red blood, it's black blood, and the animal lays there, not in a natural position, kicking, flopping around, maybe an area as big as this office before they die. And you're like, what is all this? But the telltale sign is all the orifices have black stuff coming out, not red stuff.
EHD, their blood pressure drops so fast that they basically faint. That's why
That's it. No, that's exactly right. They lay down and die.
Basically,
I don't feel good. Something's wrong.
Pass out.
And that's why they go in that defensive position. They know something's wrong. I don't know what it is.
Curl up on a ball.
Yeah, I don't feel good.
Yeah.
So they're trying to defend themselves against, I guess, predation, perceived danger. So it's usually under a tree. They want overhead protection from,
You find them a lot in the water, though. The EHD deaths, you'll find a lot in the water.
So that's where they'll go and lay down first, and they realize fevered up, this is not working. I'm in real trouble now. So they're not dead, but that's their last effort, and they'll go out in the water to cool off. And
I hunted a ranch in Nebraska. The Nebraska Sandhills probably 10 years ago. 10, 11 years ago. Big place. Guy had 20,000 acres. Some he owned, some he leased, but it's a big place. And I went up there with 2 deer tags in Nebraska Sandhills. At that time, I'm assuming it's still the same thing. Non-resident, you can get 2 deer tags, and that's an either mule deer or whitetail. And you can get, as a non-resident, 2 pronghorn tags.
Wow.
So I went up to bow hunt. It was a great hunt. We were there and over Halloween. The mule deer, we'd start every morning on top of, we'd just go to a glass and knob and eat glass pivots. They had ryegrass that was all farmsteaded, so everybody had 160 acres on a creek. So the only trees were the cottonwood trees around these old homesteads that are falling down.
Right.
And then he would go and plant ryegrass along the cricks, cricks, yeah. And then they had alfalfa pivots. And so we'd go glass, and we'd glass the mule deer and the alfalfa pivots mostly, and the whitetail would be coming out of the plum thickets and stuff on the cricks and eating in the ryegrass patches. And then our goal was, we want to see where the whitetail come in and out, because we'd go hang a tree stand during the middle of the day there. And then on the mule deer, we wanted to go see the mule deer bed down in the sandhills in a blowout or behind a shelter belt. And then we'd go stalk those. So we'd spend the late morning, middle of the day stalking mule deer. And the goal was to go hang tree stands and hunt whitetail. They'd had EHD come through 2 years prior, I think, he said. We looked at 20,000 acres. We saw 1 buck over 4.5 years old. A lot of does. He thought it killed every single whitetail buck on 20,000 acres. He didn't think they had any significant doe loss at all.
Incredible.
Yeah. Do you see that it's more, and I know some ranches that I've managed here, 2 things have stood out about EHD. One, it seems to be more prevalent when there's deer introduced with more Midwest or Northern influence. That's just my observation. You could tell me I'm wrong there.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
You're exactly right.
And it seems to me that it picks on the males, the bucks, a little harder than the does. But I don't know why. It could just be a stress thing. I don't know why that is.
A lot of it is antler shedding, the timing of the year. So we talked about September, late August, early September.
That's when it seems to get them.
That's when the bucks
you're seeing them grow in velvet, about the time they're ready to shed out, or right after they shed, dead.
Yep. Because they're carrying a 5-gallon bucket of blood on their head. And so they're attracting all these flies.
Got it.
All of that stuff. And so to the northern genetic part of it, those animals didn't evolve as well with these type animals because they lived in colder climes, snowy climes, that kind of stuff. So you bring in that northern genetic and they just don't have the evolutionary stability or the resistance to those type animals. And so that's where the northern genetics don't tend to work very well in Texas in general and South Texas specific, because South Texas is even more hostile environment, more things that'll prick you and bite you and buzz you and say south of San Antonio than even north of San Antonio.
Yeah.
But if you're a northern genetic deer where you evolve, say in Ohio or Pennsylvania, they do have mosquitoes, they do have flies, and they do have gnats, but it's only certain times of the year, and they don't have them certain times of the year. But in Texas, generally speaking, and particularly south of San Antonio, we don't have much of a winter.
Yeah.
So you have bugs 12 months out of the year. And so basically those animals have not evolved with that level of resistance, and so it kills them. So, but to your point, a lot of times it's a timing of late August, early September when they're rubbing the antlers or the velvet off their antlers, all of that blood, all of that issues. And
also your driest part of the year, ponds tend to be lower.
That's right. And then the native deer or pre-rut, the natives that grew up and evolved with it. So you just got a lot of things going on. Hormones. Got a lot of hormones going on. That's the whole reason that they're rubbing the velvet off their antlers is because of hormones. They're starting to produce testosterone. Their testicles have descended out of their body. They're ramping up the engine, getting ready for the fall. And so there's a lot of changes internally going on. But EHD this last fall, for example, in Brown County, I saw more of it in Brown County this year than I've seen in a long time.
No kidding.
So you go west of Brown County, you get into Coleman. Saw a lot of it in Coleman, some of it in McCulloch County, Brady, Melvin, some of it Menard, but in the kind of the northwestern hill country, got hit pretty hard this year.
No kidding.
It really did. Yeah, to the point that we altered our harvest recommendations on many ranches.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you can get those bucks through, say, the first 2 weeks of September, you're pretty safe. Because again, to your point, the weather cools off. Number one, dove season's always hot. Sometimes it rains during dove season, sometimes it doesn't. But after mid-September, the temperatures break. It goes from 102 to 96. And then by the end of September, it really starts dropping, and that makes a big difference. So the first the last week or so of August and the first 2 weeks of September, you kind of need to hold your breath and do a rain dance.
Let's take a quick break, and I'm going to come back, and we're going to start on chronic wasting disease, CWD.
Yes, sir.
All right.
This episode is brought to you by the Mock Ranches Real Estate Group. At Mock Ranches, we specialize in representing buyers and sellers of farms, ranches, and recreational land across the state of Texas. Our team sold over $1.25 billion of Texas land, and we focus on helping landowners make smart decisions about their most valuable assets. If you're thinking about buying or selling, or simply want to understand the land markets better, get a hold of us at mockranches.com. Mock Ranches, Texas land represented right.
All right, Macy, we're back. I had to get some caffeine, get loaded up for this next session. We're going to get into CWD and screwworms and a little bit of eminent domain condemnation around these transmission lines. So we may go a long time, but I think the listeners will stick with us on this because the content's really, really good. CWD. I know y'all were leaders in some live animal testing and CWD. But talk to me about CWD, its origin, how long it's been here, where the state's regulation is currently. Let's get into all that, just like general need to knows for landowners around moving deer, things like that.
Gotcha. Well, CWD was first identified or named in Colorado, I think about 1967, 1968, something like that. Texas, it showed up about 2012 in some wild mule deer. North of El Paso and what they call the Waco Mountains. And then it finally showed up in more central South Texas, Hondo area, I believe around 2015.
Okay. In whitetail.
In whitetail, yeah. So it started in mule deer, or it was first identified in mule deer, and then it was first identified in whitetail in about 2015. So my client just happened to be CWD whitetail positive number 2.
Okay.
And he purchased deer from positive number 1. And so back then, the protocol, the state agency Parks and Wildlife protocol was just kill them all, cut their heads off, and test their brain to see if they're sick, see if they have it. So that didn't make a lot of sense to a biologist, because very few deer had it, but a lot of deer died.
Yeah.
Cut his head off and say, oh, this deer's healthy. Now what?
And we talked earlier, there's no private ownership of those white-tailed deer, but there is a lot of money invested in those herds of deer.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Right. And if we talk about scientific breeder deer, those deer, you still don't own them, but they're held under a specialized permit.
Correct.
To where you can house them on your ranch, you can breed them, and you can sell them for monetary gains, which is different than wild deer in a pasture.
Sure.
You can't do any of that because you don't have a specialized permit.
Correct.
But there is a specialized permit. There's a lot of rules, a lot of regulations that you can take deer and breed them and sell them for financial gain and all of that stuff. So the first white-tailed deer, CWD positive, was in these breeder deer, in these breeding pens. And then my client was CWD whitetail number 2. And again, they were just whacking deer's heads off. And those deer are high-value animals because they're pedigreed. You look at a deer in the pasture or deer on the side of the road, you don't know anything about them. You don't know their mama, their daddy, their brother, their sister, their grandpa. You could be looking at a world record class doe. Mm-hmm. She's going to have the next world record buck. You don't know that.
Yeah.
You can't even guess that. You don't know. But in breeder deer, where you can draw blood and pull hair and run DNA samples and compare them to others, you can predict it. You can hedge your bets. You can use selective breeding. Much like in the racehorse industry, you can predict, you can select mama and daddy based on grandma and grandpa for some long generations back, maybe 4 or 5 generations back. So you can look back to select the future, selective breeding, however you want to.
Yeah, no different than livestock show animals.
No different than livestock. Show animals, racehorses.
Show pigs, show goats, show calves, racehorses.
Just happens to be a white-tailed deer.
Horses, any of them, yeah.
Any of them, yeah. It's animal husbandry.
Horse fraternities, yeah.
That's right. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We're not playing God. This has all been done. We're just using a white-tailed deer instead of a horse, to your point. So you can kind of hedge your bets and predict the future. Now, there's still some randomness of genetics and all that, so it's not guaranteed one and done. You're not 100% accurate. But anyway, the scientific breeder deer community was created to enhance the white-tailed deer hunting operations and to improve genetics over time. And so you can hold those deer with specialized permits as permission by Parks and Wildlife. And in doing so, there's some disease testing and monitoring requirements. And so when CWD was first found, again, they were just lopping off heads and there was no really way to pre-test. So back to the story, my client was white-tailed deer, CWD positive number 2. He had about 74 deer in the pen, and Parks and Wildlife said, well, we'll be out next week to kill the whole herd and cut their heads off. So we got a temporary restraining order against the state agency and basically wanted to buy some time to figure this out because it all happens very, very quick.
Correct.
You're in shock. You have a lot of money at stake. It's pretty shocking endeavor to be identified as in that boat.
And I don't guess you can insure white-tailed deer against disease.
At that time, you could not.
Yeah.
Today you can. Lord of London's, and there's actually a few people that do that. But again, we're talking about 2014. It didn't exist at that time. Or if it did, I'm not aware of it. I'll just say that. So it wasn't like insuring the racehorse and that kind of stuff. So anyway, I reached out to Dr. Walt Cook. At the time, he was in charge of the Texas A&M Veterinary Diagnostic Center, College Station. Okay. I had known him from my old College Station days. So I reached out to him, told him what I have, and I said, I have an idea. I want to use these 74 animals to come up with a live test for chronic wasting disease. And he said, man, I love a good challenge. When do we want to do this? And I said, well, how about Wednesday? And so he literally showed up with 4 or 5 undergrad vet students, and we handled these animals in a way that, again, we have to get started somewhere, right? But we didn't know where, so we started on all the orifices, like we talked about earlier, path of least resistance, and we did everything to these animals in the eyes of science, because we knew they were going to be, euthanized at some point. But right now we have live animals, and we identified the sick ones that we knew that were sick. And so I was photographically documenting the wasting part. So chronic wasting disease. Chronic means you're going to die. Yep. Wasting means it's going to be a slow progressive thing. And then disease means I can give it to you, you can give it to me. It's transferable. So chronic wasting disease. So I wanted to be the first person to document the wasting part. Because we had them in a facility, we had them in pens. So every 5 days I was taking pictures of these animals, trying to document the wasting part of it. And I couldn't do it. Not in the amount of time I had. Again, Parks and Wildlife was breathing down their neck, wanting to kill the deer. We had a temporary restraining order to hold them off, and so I was just trying to buy time for my photographs.
They weren't wasting fast enough, you're saying?
They weren't wasting fast enough. In fact, from the day we found them to the day we killed them, I can share those pictures with you and challenge you. You can't visually observe.
What was that time period?
2 months.
2 months.
Yeah. So like I said, does it take a year? Does it take 2 years? I'm not sure. But you'll notice you see very few pictures of CWD deer, and the ones you've seen, you've been seeing them for 10 years. In other words, show me some fresh, new CWD-related photographs that you've not seen before. I challenge you to do that. You can't do it. So I wanted to do it. I wanted to be the first one to have a
they don't even have them in elk herds or mule deer herds. You kill an elk that's CWD positive in Colorado, you didn't know that one from the one beside him.
That's right. That's right. So I wanted to document the wasting part of the disease, and I couldn't do it because I didn't have time, or the disease didn't progress fast enough. So again, Dr. Walt Cook and I and had a few other people in there to help us. Obviously, it's very all hands on deck kind of a deal. And we poked and prodded and took samples, and just really, again, in the eyes of science, we were experimenting. And lo and behold, Dr. Cook would take those samples back to A&M Diagnostic Center and run them. And I don't know, about a week into the samples, he called me. He said, hey, we've got positives. And obviously those deer are still alive. So we were able to go back and retest them using other techniques. And ultimately we had 74 guinea pigs that we tested on, and we started to identify positive deer. And we just continued testing and really refining the testing technique. And then ultimately we did have to euthanize the whole entire deer herd. So we did that. And then we were able to test the brain stem, the quote at the time, the gold standard sample against our test. And we were exactly right. So we were able to predict live animal testing without cutting her head off. And so that's how the technique was created on CWD positive number 2, and it ultimately ended up saving the entire industry because, again, as the first knee-jerk response was to kill all the deer and cut their heads off, well, that's obviously going to put you out of business in short order, So but
they were still doing that up until just a couple of years ago.
Right. In some situations, yeah. So it gave landowners an option. So they even had an option where you could go and kill a certain percentage of the deer and test out of it that way, or you could do live animal testing. And so, again, there was a lot of...
What's the live animal testing per deer cost?
Well, today it's a lot more than it was back then. But let's just say on average, because you have to hire a licensed veterinarian. That's the key to this whole thing, because it's considered surgery. So you and I, Kasey, can't anesthetize a deer and do a rectal biopsy, for example, because that's considered surgery. That's a live animal. It's a native big game animal, and you and I are not qualified. So you have to have a licensed veterinarian to do the live animal test. Now, if we shot it or it died and we wanted to cut the head off, well, we can do that. You and I can do that. But live animal surgery on native animals.
Send the brainstem in, right? They test.
Yeah, you and I can do that. But live animal sample collection, you and I are not qualified for that, so you have to get a veterinarian involved. So that's the bulk of your cost, is you're buying a veterinarian's time and skill set. But it's $175 roughly, speaking. It depends on how many samples you do and all that stuff. And back then we didn't have a whole lot of darting drugs. They weren't nearly as refined, so we were having to work those deer manually, physically bringing them into the chute, the load and chute, drop the floor on them and all that stuff. So that kept the cost down. because it caused some more injuries and some mortalities. You know, that goes without saying.
If anybody's ever tried to wrestle a live white-tailed deer, it is.
That is a young person sport.
Man, they'll beat the crap out of you.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So there is some inert danger and mortality with that.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you know, there's a lot of different drugs. There's a lot better darting guns, darting material, and a lot more skill set involved. And so the darting is much more easier on the animal, easier on the human, safer, but again, it's still time, cost, skill set involved. And so you don't have to have the big $200,000 handling facility or whatever it costs, you know, the big fancy facility. You can literally dart 100 deer in an afternoon if you have the proper skill set. So, but the idea is you really need to anesthetize or slow the deer down so that you can do either the tonsil or the rectal. So that's what we ended up doing. You could go in through the throat and take some of the tonsils in that upper neck, or you can go in the rectum, go in there about 1.5 inches to that smooth pink muscle wall and take a piece of, let's say it's dime size, just for comparison. So imagine with a scalpel taking a piece of the rectum out that's about the size of a dime. And the reason it has to be about the size of a dime is because there's follicles, skin follicles in there, and the Texas A&M Diagnostic Laboratory and the National Vet Lab in Ames, Iowa, they require 9 follicles for testing because they want to have a preliminary test, and then if something goes wrong and they say, oh, it's positive, well, they want to have another side of the test to test again.
Test it again.
Kind of a retest.
Yep.
So think of the size of a dime if you do a rectal exam, but it's on the other end of the mouth, right? It's a long ways from the heart, long ways from the mouth. So it's not as invasive. But you take out a piece of the tonsil, you don't need quite a large of a piece of the tonsil, but man, that's right in the boiler room. That's where you're eating and drinking. And so there's a little bit of hesitancy to do the tonsil because it's a little bit more invasive and there's a little bit more of a recovery period for the animal. You see what I mean?
Yep.
So we can poke and prod either end, but really for the animal's sake, the speed and the efficiency of the testing, the rectal exam is a little more efficient, if that makes sense to you. But it needs to be the size of a dime. Well, if you've ever seen a deer rectum, it's not that big. And so some of these deer can live a long time and they can outlive their rectum. You know what I'm saying? There's only so many dime-sized pieces you can take on a deer. And we ran into that on some of these, especially these does that were proven through their pedigree, good producers, always raised fawns, always raised the big deer. Some of those deer be 15 years old. Well, you know, there's not a lot of sample left in them. Yeah. So you would have to use tonsil or alternate and that kind of stuff. So anyway, that was the history behind the live animal sampling, and it worked very, very well. Now fast forward from 2015 to now, there's been lots of other experimentations done. RT Quick, they're working on some blood samples techniques. They're working on saliva samples. I've been vaguely involved with each of those. And right now I would call it marginal success, not a huge success. Any of those 3 different techniques are working, but it's not past the standard of, you know, science. Science wants you to be, you know, 99% right and 1% wrong. Well, those techniques, the RT Quick, no, they're not there yet. So there's a lot of, I guess you call them false positives and false negatives. There's all of that. So it's not been refined. And so there's a lot of people working on it because the live animal tests that we created, they now use them in other countries. They use them in other states. They use them on caribou in Canada and Sweden and China. It's pretty cool to know that, you know, in Texas, that we created a live animal test for all cervids. You know, we were concentrating obviously on white-tailed deer, but they're doing it on red deer, on moose, on caribou, black-tailed deer. And so it's been used nationally now.
You mentioned the red deer and the elk. I hear this a lot in the deer breeder industry. We could have hours of conversations around this, you know. I heard this a lot in the deer breeder industry and have for years, that the CWD is being spread by elk and red deer, not the white-tailed deer. That it's, you know, the unregulated movement of elk and red deer is how it's spreading. Now I've even heard alfalfa hay is bringing it in.
Right. You always want to blame the other guy, right?
Yeah.
Right. So if you're a whitetail guy, you're going to blame it on the elk. If you're an elk guy, you're going to blame it on the whitetail or the mule deer or the muntjac, you know, muntjac or CWD. So yeah, Muntjac hasn't got the blame yet, but they're on the hook. It's coming up, buddy. You're fixing to be famous, Mr. Muntjac. So to your point, all of those cervids that we just talked about, and again, caribou, moose, reindeer, all of those can have and do carry, contract, transmit chronic wasting disease.
Axis deer, no. Fallow deer, no.
Right. So there's one case where an axis buck was deemed positive, but it never became an official positive because the scenario in which that was found. So in other words, that animal died. He wasn't relocated. He wasn't found dead until 10 days after he was dead. Then the sample was frozen, and then the sample was thawed, and even the laboratory said this was a highly degraded sample. So it showed up as a misfolded prion positive, but it doesn't meet the testing standards that the rest of the world adheres to.
Yeah.
So was it positive or not? I don't know. The lab said this is a terrible sample because of all the history behind it. But it sure does show signs of misfolded prions. But did it get the misfolded prion from laying on the ground for 10 days? Did the buzzard that pecked his eyes out, did he transmit it? You see what I mean?
Oh, yeah, sure.
There's way too many questions. So it was not a fresh
factors.
sample. Now, they have tested thousands of fresh sampled axis and fallow and black buck, scimitar, horned oryx. There's doing some, I don't know if this is the correct word. I know it's not politically correct, but gain of function, where they're taking CWD positive brain cells and injecting it into live axis deer in their brain, putting a needle in their brain, live animals, and they're injecting it into their brain. They're injecting it into their food sources at these super high 20x doses, trying to force axis deer to get it, to see if it'll jump species, to see if it'll contract it. And so far, thank goodness, knock on wood, that's not been the case. But again, it's science, right? So you're going to subject those animals to dosages that would be impossible in the real world.
Yeah.
But there's some science
Just
fiction.
like us with artificial sweeteners and red dyes.
Pretty much same thing. Yeah. So there's a lot of hocus pocus stuff going on. But again, in the eyes of science, you gotta push the envelope, right? So as of right now, they still say that axis black buck fallow does not get it. They're not CWD susceptible. But again, there's that one caveat, that one-off, and they've tested hundreds, if not thousands, of axis deer. So right now, knock on wood, axis deer are not listed as CWD susceptible species. It typically is, think of it as this, all North American native cervids. And so axis and black buck and all, they're either not native, they're not North American, or they're not cervids, that kind of a deal. So North American cervids, all of them we just mentioned. But Muntjac is an exception to the rule. He's not native. And Sika deer. Okay. Because Sika are so closely related.
Close to elk and red deer.
Yeah, they're basically a first cousin, second cousin. Yeah. So there's two exceptions, and that's Sika and Muntjac. They're not native. But anyway, that's the other two exceptions to the and red deer, of course. And then any cross thereof. Right now there's people experimenting, and whether it be on purpose or accident, there's a lot of crosses out there, Sika and elk and silk and, just all that stuff. So any of those crosses are also susceptible. So that's something to be aware of. A lot of people didn't realize that just these hybrids, whether it's on purpose or accidental, they're also susceptible species. And we're seeing a lot more hybrids out there, hybrid whitetail, hybrid mule deer. There's a lot of hybridization out there. So you just got to be aware of it. Fort Stockton, pretty neat area right there where the whitetail and the mule deer. Yeah, there's a lot of hybrids.
Goes from there up toward Quanah too, up that Pease River. You kind of get that extension.
Pretty interesting animal. He doesn't know if he should run or hop or run in circles or hide. He doesn't know what to do. Yeah. Pretty interesting. Yeah.
That we saw in the early 2000s through, I don't know when it was, probably 2020, the Texas Deer Association just got huge. And which was the deer breeders organization,
Yes, sir.
And I was never really involved there, but I liked what they did. I just didn't have a super reason to be involved. Seemed like that organization has really shrunk up, along with the increased regulation on CWD. So I'm guessing, making an assumption here, that all goes along with the difficulty in moving deer.
That's right. You remember that specialized permit, and they're whitetail deer, so everybody owns them, nobody owns them.
Correct.
And so you can hold those deer in captivity under a specialized permit. So Parks and Wildlife created that permit Parks and Wildlife manages that permit. Parks and Wildlife dictates that permit. And that's the big government that we talked about. And one of the primary reasons that I see that the exotic animals have done so well is because
they've done
of
it.
that.
The EWA, Exotic Wildlife Association, has really blown up as the deer breeder groups have really retracted.
That's right. You're seeing an ebb and flow.
Yes, sir.
And a lot of it is response to the big government, the ownership, and the bundle of rights. I mean, we're both real estate guys. We're land guys. We're talking about bundles of rights as it relates to animal husbandry. Whitetail deer, outside of the hunting season, outside of the special permit, you have no bundle of rights. You can't manage what you can't control. And so the exotics, you have a full complement of bundles of rights. You own them, you sell them, you can hunt them day and night. You can use a spear, you can use a rope, anything. Whitetail deer, boy, you got to be an attorney to read the hunting regulations. You know, there's days that you can hunt, there's days you cannot hunt. There's a limit on how many you can kill, and which one you can kill, how wide his antlers are. You know, what do you wear? You know, the caliber of gun. You know, can you use a spear? Can you use a knife? There's
Poundage of your bow, type of broadhead, all of it.
Everything, yeah. So you have to be an attorney to decipher the logbook that's 4 inches thick on what county, what time of the year, where, in which state I can hunt a whitetail deer. All I need to go hunt exotics is a gun of my choice or a weapon of my choice and landowner permission. That's all I need. I can shoot them out of the headlights of my pickup. I can rope them with my rope. I can stab them with my pocket knife. All I got to have is the landowner's permission and a weapon of my choice. And day or night, Saturday or Sunday, holiday. So a lot of people are attracted to that bundle of rights.
Yeah, they are.
And that's what you're seeing. So Exotic Wildlife Association has responded well. They've done a fantastic job. And that organization I support fully. I endorse it 100%, and they have done a great job. They've gotten very involved legislatively.
Yeah, they have.
They've gotten very involved educationally, because you go back, say, 25, 30 years ago, wasn't a lot of information available about exotic animals. There was some, but not much. Nowadays, they've got an incredible website. They've got incredible speaker panels. They've got experts in all different fields. Their convention, I attend their conventions. I'll be there in a couple of months. It's doubled almost in the last many years. Their annual convention attendance continues to double. That's a hockey puck growth pattern.
Yeah.
They're doing great. Conversely, we go back over and talk about Texas Deer Association. You know, it was formed in 1999, and it was formed to create legislation power to represent themselves. Because again, they don't own anything.
Sure.
They can't control anything. They're 100% being dictated by Parks and Wildlife. So they wanted to have a little more say in the process.
Sure.
So they became an association. They got members. They got dues. They had lobbyists, hired paid lobbyists, and they spent a tremendous amount of time at the state capitol. I participated in that because, like you, I'm a strong proponent of landowner rights and private property, and some of those lines were getting very blurred. So I was very active with the Texas Deer Association as it related to private landowners, education, animal husbandry, because ultimately these animals do impact the wild deer herd, and in a lot of ways, some positive, some negative. And so my job as a whitetail deer aficionado, I wanted to help with that transition going from pen to pasture, because it's not that easy. It's not that subtle. It's not that smooth. There's some work to be done there. So I was very involved early on with the Texas Deer Association, and all of my testimony, all of my efforts were related to landowners' bundles of rights and education involving breeder deer and private property rights and breeder deer and the use of that permit.
Where are we at today with CWD, with the ability to transfer deer, buy deer, move them? If I want to buy a ranch and stock it, where are we at?
So right now, that's the only choice you have. So you buy a ranch and you want to stock it, just as you said, the only option of stocking that ranch with whitetail deer, you're forced by regulation to use breeder deer, whether you want to or not, because those deer can be live animal tested for CWD. And so they're held under specialized permit. Then you get them tested. You have to maintain.
Breeder deer meaning deer that come out of a scientific deer breeder program.
Yes, yes. And so we know, like I say, their pedigree. We know everything about them. We know not only how old they are, we know their birth date to the week, sometimes the day. So instead of saying, oh, I think that deer's 3.5, like, no, he's 3 years, 4 months, and 21 days old. He was born on a Wednesday, and there's his mom, and there's his dad, and his grandpa's over here. And I can show you pictures of him because they're all pedigree. That was the original intent of that organization, I guess you would say. So anyway, so if you want to restock your ranch right now with white-tailed deer, the only option you have is to purchase these deer being held by a breeder permit. And that involves live animal testing. So the breeder, the seller, he has to live animal test, maintain those deer alive, and then gets the test results back, which, boy, that's a moving target. It can take anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months, depending on a lot of factors, timing and backlog and all that. And then once you get a not detected, a negative test result, then the seller can bring you, the buyer, the deer. You can put that deer immediately out of the trailer onto your ranch, or you can build what they call a soft release or kind of a holding pen and put those deer in there, because there normally is an acclimation period. Because again, that deer was born and raised in a captive environment. Usually those pens are small. Usually those pens don't have native brush in them. So that deer knows that feed comes out of a bucket. He knows that the water comes out of a trough, and it's clean water and it's clean feed, and he's not interacting with coyotes, cows. What's a prickly pear cactus? Do I eat it? Do I lay on it? I don't know anything about it, right? So the soft release pen is just that. It's a training field, if you would. It's boot camp.
Pen,
it's boot camp. So I'm going to introduce you to the sounds and smells of coyotes and prickly pears and black brush and trees and mosquitoes.
How long can they stay in soft release?
You know, it depends on the time of the year you put in there. There's a release date that it has to be out by such and such a date, and it's usually, I don't know, like
middle of September. Isn't it?
Usually it's so many days prior to a hunting season, maybe 10 or 11 days prior to a hunting season. So you said middle of September. So it depends on when you put him in there. So let's say you put him in there September, well, you can stay in there for 9 months. But if you put him in there in August, well, you can only stay in there 30 days. You see what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
So there's a hard deadline of release, but there's not that hard of a deadline of putting him in there. So the longer he stays in there, the better. Because again, it's a school of hard knocks. It's a learning curve in there. And then you just simply open the gates, turn off the feeder, turn off the water, and drive away. You don't have to chase them out and move them out. They're going to leave on their own because there's no food and water inside that pen. Typically, those pens range in size from 2 acres to 100. Usually, they're not that big. Normally, they're 2 acres.
Most of them 10 acres or so.
Yeah. Usually, they're small because, again, you want to kind of keep an eye on it and, that kind of stuff. So they're smaller pens traditionally, but it's called soft release pen. Again, that takes a special permit issued and maintained by Parks and Wildlife. Now, once that deer exits that soft release pen, basically the title has changed hands. He becomes a wild, quote, native deer. Now, he's not native, but he's considered native from a law enforcement, from a hunting perspective.
Yeah, if he's got 2 ear tags in him and a tree falls on your fence and he jumps into your neighbor's during a legal hunting season, your neighbor has every right to shoot him.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Right. So his title has changed.
Becomes property of the people of Texas.
That's right. Right. Yeah. It really changed when you put him in the soft release pen, but you can't hunt deer in soft release pens. So there's a little gray area there. But once you release him out of the soft release, now he's subject, 100% subject to the wild native deer regulations. He's no longer a breeder deer. You can't put him back in the pen.
You can no longer catch him and doctor him.
Can't dart him, move him, catch him, sell him. You've lost title. Regardless of how much money you paid for him, regardless of his pedigree, you've lost title. And to your point, if he gets out, if you left the gate open and he gets out on the highway or he gets on the neighbor's property, you can't go get him. He's not your deer. He never was your deer. So there's that.
What's the survival rate if you just turn them out into the pasture? If I've got 500 acres, high fence, I just buy some deer from Taylor over here, who's a deer breeder, a scientific deer breeder program, right, Taylor? Yes, sir. Yep. And I bring him to the ranch and open the trailer and kick him out. What's the survival rate?
Flip a coin. Take a dart and throw it on the board. That's the quick answer. Now the detailed answer is, let's talk about your coyotes. Let's talk about your predator control. And you say, well, I don't do anything. It's like, that's going to cost you some money. But let you say, I haven't seen or caught a coyote on my ranch in 2 or 3 years because we run snares 24/7. Okay, that's a good answer to the first question. Second
Yeah,
question,
water distribution. Food
yeah.
distribution,
How much
all that.
water do you
Yeah.
have? And you say, "Oh, I've got one pond in the center."
Yeah,
That's
that
we got a
ain't gonna
problem.
work. Yeah.
We got a problem.
Yeah, I've seen you really need water troughs on the fence, because that's what they're going to do is they're going to find a fence and start walking.
That's right.
And so water troughs on the fence, they find those. Feeders on the fence, they find that. They have a hard time. They have a hard time walking internally for a while to go find it internally.
So think about that. For his whole life, he's never seen brush. Nobody ever taught him that that's escape cover. He doesn't even know what that word means, and why would you use it? See what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So now you put him on a 300-acre ranch. It's full of something he's never seen. Do you really think he's going to run in there? No, he's going to run to the fence, because what does he know? He knows the fence.
He knows the fence.
So a coyote shows up, an airplane flies by, he's running to the fence.
Yeah,
so he can see
coyotes
you.
corner him up.
That's it.
Yeah,
That's
dogs
it.
corner him up.
So that's why my first question was, Kasey, what do you do on predators? And you say, oh, nothing. I'm going to say you just wasted a ton of money. So your success rate, to answer your question, would be very poor. You're going to have a bad taste in your mouth, and you're going to lose your ass. You're going to lose a lot of money, and you probably shouldn't do it if that's the way you're going to do it.
Yeah.
As your biologist, I'm going to say that's not how we're going to do it. I'm going to educate you 6 months in advance. When you go to think about or buying these deer breeders, then the very next conversation we're going to have is predator control. The next question is water distribution. The next question is feed distribution, all of that. And then we're going to talk about the native deer. What is your native deer density? And maybe you don't have any native deer, so that's a big plus. But let's just say you have a heavy deer density. You're just bringing in these new genetics because you think it's going to make a big genetic difference to the population. That in itself is going to be a big problem, because your native bucks are street fighters.
Yeah.
They're tough. They're raised on New York City.
Yeah, it's not taking 200, mixing it with 100, and making 150 inch average. Not at all. Not at all.
You're not building a cake here. No. So this was like taking Macy from San Saba, Texas, and putting him in College Station. There was a learning curve, buddy. It was like, you know. So yeah, you're taking a deer raised in a pen that's never seen a coyote or a black brush, and you're putting him out there with a street fighter. Typically not going to end well.
Yeah, best thing I've seen is, of course, we always work with biologists when we've done it right. But the best thing I've seen is clear the native deer off.
That's right.
As much as you can.
As much as you can.
Native deer off.
Yeah.
And then when you introduce the new deer, which is a great tool, by the way. I mean, it's a phenomenal way to just have an incredible deer herd later on. It does take money, and it does take time, and it does take resources and patience.
Coordination.
And coordination and all the things. But 5 years from now, it can be really worth it.
It works very, very well when all of those
Yes, sir.
when all those stars align.
Yeah.
It works wonderfully.
It works really,
Great
really well.
success
If you can get those bucks and does through their first year, get them bred. I've seen, if they're not used in soft release, as much as 50% mortality. Your deer that were properly released, we've seen on average, I'd say 15% mortality first year. And then second year, you still have some of that. They're just not as hardy.
Yep.
You have a little more mortality the second year. But the pasture-born fawns, the ones that get raised, a lot of the mothers are not super good mothers.
Not that good
so
a mother.
They'll have a fawn and walk off, because every other time they've had a fawn and walked off in a 2-acre pen, and they're going to come back and find the fawn.
Right.
Or the fawn's going to find them. They're just in 2
Or
acres.
somebody picked the fawn up and raised the fawn for her.
Correct.
That's
or somebody picked. So now they've got a pasture-born fawn, and they don't know much about predators, and they'll walk off and forget the fawn and assume that they're going to walk back by the fawn on their 2-acre loop, and they don't do that. So the ones that get born in the pasture and raised from there on, I've seen pretty good survival.
I would say excellent.
Yeah.
Once they become a yearling,
I mean, they're just a deer then.
excellent results.
They're just a deer.
That's right. They're just a deer. And they become just as wild. So it works very, very well. It's just all that minutia and that gray matter from pen to pasture.
Yeah.
And again, that's why I got more involved as a wildlife biologist with the Texas Deer Association, because I love big deer. I think everybody does.
Oh, sure.
And so I wanted to ensure the best chance of success from pen to pasture. And the deer breeders came into it initially. It was a business model, right? They're businessmen, all that. But that's not what I saw. That's not what my participation was. I was not selling deer. I never sold a deer. You see what I mean? So as a wildlife biologist, I felt like I had a fiduciary responsibility for the survivability and the transitioning of the deer to the pasture. I felt like,
it's like
in my heart,
a physician doesn't walk by a sick person and not feel like, man, I have a responsibility to help the person.
That's right.
Wildlife biologist, you saw a responsibility to help the animals.
I felt it was a God-given fiduciary responsibility, and I know I'm throwing in some big words here, but that's the way I felt. So I got involved because I wanted to ensure success to the best of my ability. And there were some haters out there that, said I shouldn't be dealing with the enemy. I shouldn't be dealing with the deer breeders. And I always dismissed them because, again, I felt in my heart, I felt in my Christian heart that God put me in that position to be a fiduciary for that transition. Mm-hmm. Again, I wasn't selling deer, I wasn't raising deer, but I felt responsible. I felt like it was my duty to help that process. Mm-hmm. And to your point, when it works beautifully. But to make it work beautifully, there's several steps you've got to go in order, and you can't skip one. You can't really be in a hurry. You can't really be careless, and you certainly can't be negligent. And so those are the horror stories that we know about. Mm-hmm. They're out there. There's no secret. There are going to be some people say, man, that doesn't work. I spent a lot of money. I agree 100%. If you don't do X, Y, and Z, I can guarantee you it won't work, and I can guarantee you'll go broke. And I'll save you time, money, and gray hair and say you're going to lose your butt. But if you follow these rules and these recommendations, it likely will work, and it'll be the best thing you've ever seen in your life. Yeah. So that's my stance. That's my talking on the Texas Deer Association. Is I've been involved with them from the very beginning because I felt a responsibility. I say a fiduciary. I keep using that word. I don't think that's the right word, but I felt like God led me to do it because God put me in this position to be a wildlife biologist, to work with over 600 landowners and to help them, to educate them, to steward this resource. And I got into this career because I love the white-tailed deer. So a white-tailed deer that's born in captivity, guess what? Still a white-tailed deer.
Still a white-tailed deer.
So a 300-inch deer, a 400-inch deer, still a white-tailed deer. See what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So I still want to work with anything white-tailed deer. If somebody starts raising midget white-tailed deer and they score 105 inches, I promise you today, I'm telling you right now,
Coos deer, Macy.
I'm going to be on board with it.
Desert coos deer.
I'm going to be on board with it, Kasey, because I love white-tailed deer and I feel very passionate and driven, and God put me in this position, and I'm not going to squander that position.
Yeah.
So as silly as that example is, I promise you I'm going to sign up, I'm going to be on board, and I'm going to the Capitol, and I'm going to advocate for landowners to raise midget white-tailed deer.
I love it.
Yeah, that's my word to you. That's my word to you, buddy.
Last question on CWD. What kind of future testing is required if I do go through the process, purchase deer from a scientific deer breeder, release him on the ranch? Now, what is my future testing? What regulations am I putting on myself there? What should I know about that?
That's a great question. So the government governing agency has implemented a 5-year look back.
Okay.
So let's use your example. You have 300 acres and you just went and bought some deer, breeder deer. You turned them loose on your ranch. You did it right. You listened to the biologist. Everything worked great. It's working perfectly, However, you bought it from a singular source, or you bought it from a source, a breeder. Now, for the next 5 years, moving forward, if that deer breeder that you purchased from has any connections with CWD, whether it be on his property that your deer came from, or if he brought in other deer that are tied to CWD, another property, maybe 200 miles away, but he brought a deer in from that property into his facility, and then you bought deer from that same facility, you're called a trace out. You're associated now with chronic wasting disease. Now, what's magical about the 5 years is research has determined, there's some right or wrong, there's some argument out there, that the gestation period of CWD, the incubation period of CWD can be as much as 2.5 years.
Okay.
So regulations and Texas Animal Health Commission, the USDA, APHIS, the way they treat diseases, whether it be plant or animal or anything, parasite or anything, they double the lifespan or I'm sorry, the incubation, they double it. And in some cases, they'll triple it to say that it no longer exists. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So if the incubation is 2.5 years, then you don't want to set your look back 2.5 years, because you could have deer and not,
Sure.
I mean, you could have a disease and not know it. But if you double it, you say 5 years, well, then what are the chances that if you look back on a disease that only lasts 2.5 years before it's highly detectable, that you have it? Chances are very low after 5 years. So that's where the 5-year terminology came from, is it basically doubled the incubation or the gestation period of chronic wasting disease. So to answer your question, now you are on the hook. You are being held responsible for the next 5 years. So it's 2026. So until 2031, you have to worry about that deer breeder if he stays in business, if he ever gets involved in an epidemiological sense for 5 years, you're still have some responsibility. Now, what does that look like? It depends on your deer breeder level of responsibility. Was the disease born and raised on his property? Was it found throughout his property, or was it a one-off? There's a economy of scale there, right?
Yeah.
And so, worst case scenario, they're going to come back to you and say, "Hey, Kasey, you bought doe number 17, and it's tied to your friend. That doe's
Taylor.
So Taylor's, the sister of that deer has CWD, and you bought the sister of that deer that has CWD on Taylor's ranch. Kasey, we need you to go out there and kill doe number 17. Yellow 17, that's the sister of Taylor's doe that turned positive.
Yeah.
So we killed Taylor's doe, killed her. We're not live animal testing, we're killing her. Boom, she's dead. But Kasey, you bought the womb sister of that doe. We need you to go out to your ranch and kill yellow 17. And you're going to say, I paid $5,000 for it.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. I don't care if you paid $20,000 for it. I don't care if you got drunk in an auction and paid $100,000 for it.
Happens.
I don't care. It's happened. It's happened. It's happened. Yeah. I don't even know why I brought that up. Where'd that come from? But anyway, I digress. So I don't care what you paid for it. I don't care about her genetics. I don't care about your finances. You have to go out and kill that deer. If you do, you shoot her, cut her head off, because there's no live animal testing at this point. The stakes have gotten too high. This is dead animal testing only. You shoot her, you send her to the lab, and she comes back as negative, not detective. You're off the hook. You're done. But let's say doe 17.
Doesn't matter if she's in the pasture or in a pen.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You got to kill her.
Presumably she's in the pasture at this point.
Yeah, at this point, because you put her in you did all the steps that you were supposed to do, but now she's in the pasture. You got to go kill her. You're going to say, well, she has a fawn, a little buck fawn nursing on her. It's spotted. Who cares?
Doesn't matter.
Don't care. Kill it. This is about disease. This is not about your fawn crop. This is not about your budget, your finances. Don't care. Kill it. So you kill it, right? And she comes back as negative or not detected. You're off the hook. You're like, you dodged a bullet. But let's say, okay, you get that phone call, Kasey, go kill yellow 17. And you're going to say, holy crap, I just pulled her out of my low fence, barbed wire fence. She was hung in the fence with her back leg last year. I remember, because I paid so much money for that doe, I factually know she's dead. Now you got a problem, because you can't test that deer, and she lived and died on your property. So now they're going to come to you and say, okay, Mr. Mock. They went from Kasey to now all of a sudden you're Mr. Mock. Okay, now this coming hunting season, and for the next 3 hunting seasons, you have to test 100% of your hunter harvested deer, because that doe that we needed you to test was commingling all over your 300 acres. She was even being bred by some of your bucks. We don't know who, right? But again, remember, chronic wasting disease. What does disease mean? Is communicable.
Yeah.
So now, Mr. Mock, I need you for the next 3 years, 100% of all the deer that you kill through normal hunting practices, you have to test them at your expense. You asked me earlier, how much does a test cost? Well, a live animal test is more expensive, but a dead test still may cost you $100. I'm just rounding off the number. So you have to shoot these deer. Let's just say, okay, now in your 300 acres, you're going to kill 10 deer, right? Let's just make it simple. So you're going to kill 10 deer this fall. Doesn't matter if it's a buck or a doe, but even if it's a trophy buck, you have to pull the obex out of the brain. So that means you're going to have to cape that animal, or almost cape that animal on your own ranch, take the sample, send it to A&M for testing. Provided it all comes back negative or not detected, everything's cool. The second year rolls around. You go out and shoot 10 deer. You send it to A&M. Rinse and repeat. Then after the third year, so you've tested 30 of your deer and they're all negative, you're off the hook. So you got a 5-year look back.
Yeah.
And then if you are in a trace out, then you got 3 years looking ahead.
Hey, the biggest problem I've seen here is asking most of my clients to cape a deer.
Exactly. and not shoot that doe in the upper neck or the head. Yeah.
Biggest problem I've seen is asking them and expecting them to be able to cape a deer.
That's right. So, or
properly.
Yeah, or not, or just not meeting that quota, or you forget it, or your brother-in-law comes out one weekend, you're out of town, you let your brother-in-law come to the ranch shoot a deer, and he forgot, or he didn't know, or he just said, I'm not going to do it. That's Kasey's deal. And he takes that deer and leaves. You, as the landowner, you, as the permit holder, are in trouble. So now,
and if you can't find doe tag yellow number 3, if she's nowhere to be found, then I'm assuming you move into the second deal where you have to go test
the population
test of you got to go test your harvest.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
If you say, hey, we've looked for her, can't find her.
Right.
We've fed corn, we've hunted, we put out game cameras, she's nowhere to be found.
That's where you become Mr. Mock. And they say,
they can't subpoena your game camera photos, I'm assuming, but you move right into, okay, you've got to start testing for the next 3 years.
Right. But immediately when you're having this conversation, your pasture, your 300 acres is now locked down. It's quarantined. It's called non-movement qualified.
Yeah.
So now you can't move deer off that ranch even if you wanted to. And now you're labeled. You have a label on you that may or may not be fair, but you're non-movement qualified.
Yeah.
No fault of your own, because as soon as you get the phone call that he has a deer, you're non-movement qualified.
It's got to translate into some diminished value, I would think.
Exactly. So you're in the real estate sector.
Therein lies another problem.
Therein lies a whole nother set of problems that we could spend 2 hours talking on. But now you're put your real estate hat on and go sell your 300-acre non-movement trace-out ranch.
How does that hurt the marketability of a ranch?
Crushing it.
Crushes it.
Now you can look at some points on a graph and they'll say, oh, it's not bad. It's not bad. I've had my real estate license for 21 years. I've been working in this industry for 34 years. It crushes it.
It crushes it.
I can give you 40 examples, real world examples, not stuff that's being produced on a fancy chart. They'll say, oh, it's crushing it.
Yeah.
And what it crushes mainly, Kasey, is the land use. So your 300-acre trophy whitetail deer ranch is now going to be a subdivision. Your trophy whitetail deer ranch is now a solar farm, because nobody wants to buy your ranch as their trophy hunting ranch, because you screwed it up, right?
Yeah.
But the developer,
he doesn't care.
He doesn't give a dang about a whitetail deer. But a solar farm, wind turbines, come on. And they're going to pay you probably more than the guy the deer ranch would. So I'm here to testify it crushes it.
Yeah, it's no different than right now. We'll probably run out of time for this, but it's no different than a transmission line likely coming over you. You can't sell them.
That's right.
Nobody wants them till they know the predictable outcome.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Again, it goes back to that control. You can't manage what you can't control.
That's correct. Those are the biggest factors for land today. Is the uncontrollables.
The uncontrollable
land
factors.
always makes money over a 10-year period, except for those things that you can't control.
Yeah, it's a big exception.
Yeah,
that's
big
a
exception.
Big comma, big exception. Yeah.
Okay, we probably need an intermission here for the listeners because we're about to jump into the new World Screwworm.
All right.
So probably take an intermission here, and then everybody that's listening, get you some coffee, and popcorn, and a piece of paper. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by the Mock Ranches Real Estate Group. At Mock Ranches, we specialize in representing buyers and sellers of farms, ranches, and recreational land across the state of Texas. Our team sold over $1.25 billion of Texas land, and we focus on helping landowners make smart decisions about their most valuable assets. If you're thinking about buying or selling, or simply want to understand the land markets better, get a hold of us at mockranches.com. Mock Ranches, Texas land represented right.
All right, Macy, probably back from intermission, perhaps the biggest thing I've ever seen in my life of that's going to impact agriculture and wildlife alike is the New World Screwworm.
Yes, sir.
Because it's non-discriminatory. It doesn't just affect sick animals. And the first New World Screwworm since the early 1960s was found and confirmed in South Texas yesterday, June 3rd, 2026, in a baby calf in Zavala County, La Pryor, Texas. Big deal.
Big deal. Huge deal.
Huge deal. I had, for the listeners, if you go back 4 episodes, I think, 3 or 4 episodes, I interviewed Dr. T.R. Lansford with the Texas Animal Health Commission. Dr. Lansford was generous to drive in just like you are, Macy, and he sat in that chair. We talked for almost 2 hours about the livestock side of the New World Screwworm. So you and I will spend most of our time on the wildlife side of it, which I think is probably a much greater risk, to be honest with you, economic risk than there is on the livestock side. Just because they're livestock, we can put our hands on them every day. We can pin them up. You know, my cows, I can go get cows. I can cake them into the lot. I can dry lot them if I need to. Mm-hmm. If I absolutely had to, I could dry lot them. I can put eyes on them every day. I can run them through the work and shoot. They're easy to treat. You can ranch cattle, sheep, goats, cattle, horses with screwworms. They did it in the 50s. They did it in the early 60s. Our grandparents did it. Had a lot more cowboys probably then,
right,
that could rope and tie one down and actually doctor, but you can do it. White-tailed deer, bighorn sheep, exotics, out-edge sheep, nilgai antelope, can't doctor those. So New World Screwworm, if you never lived through it, which I didn't, you didn't either, I don't believe, I hear stories from the 50s and 60s of just almost no deer from our grandparents and some of the old timers. I've been around my whole life in hunting camps and on ranches. I hear stories of almost no deer. And used to, I would think, well, their habitat was different. They didn't feed them. They didn't manage them. There wasn't as much brush. You look at the old aerials of the ranches and there's 80% more brush today with juniper and mesquite than there was then. And kind of just thought that was the reason. And they shot everyone they saw, whatever the case was. But as I've had more of those conversations in the last 6 months, I mean, you find out that the screwworms actually killed a lot of the fawns.
Almost everything. But yeah, in particular, white-tailed deer. Parks and Wildlife has put out some information saying that they anticipate 80% mortality on the fawns. And yeah, the timing of the screwworm right now could not be worse.
Because fawns are dropping right now.
Because the fawns are dropping right now.
We started this week here in Erath County. We started dropping fawns.
That's right.
Based on gestation, our rut here is early November. We started dropping fawns this week.
That's right. That's right. And in Zavala County, they'll start later this month. The peak fawning date in Zavala County is July 15th.
Okay.
In other words, that's when the majority of the fawns hitting the ground. So in June, they're going to start hitting the ground. And so the timing could not be any worse from that perspective. And that's how it works. You know, it takes out all your production or the majority of your production first, being the fawns. And then, you know, in late August, early September, we have the bucks rubbing their velvet.
Well, talk real quick, before you go there, real quick about the fly, the maggot, how it works, why it targets them. Just talk about the fly a little bit, the parasite itself.
Okay, great. First, I want to compliment you and Dr. Langford did a great job. I listened to that episode a couple of times, and y'all both did a great job, and he really went into the biology of it as well. Mm-hmm. So I know I'm going to be repeating some of the same material, but you know, the fly, the female fly finds an opening on a host. And a host means anything that bleeds. So any warm-blooded.
Warm-blooded,
yeah. Not mammal, but warm-blooded. So we're talking about a bird, talking about an armadillo, a cotton rat, you know, a jackrabbit, a javelina, feral hog, and aoudad, all that stuff. Yeah. So anything that bleeds is subject to screwworm infestation, and that includes birds. Now, birds don't typically have a lot of injuries, but I'm talking about bobwhite quail, talking about turkeys, I'm talking about songbirds, mockingbirds, hummingbirds. Again, birds don't have a lot of physical injuries, but they bleed, and they're subject to that. So to your point earlier, when screwworm got here in Texas in 50s and 60s and all the way through the 70s, it devastated everything. But we're here today talking about whitetail deer a lot. So it devastated the deer herd in Texas, generally speaking, to the point, the lowest numbers since recorded history. So Parks and Wildlife started restocking whitetail deer, and they got their seed stock. Think King Ranch, Aransas National Wildlife, South Padre Island Seashore, because they did not have screwworm along the coast because of the wind.
Oh,
the
yeah.
constant wind. That little bitty fly can't handle wind. So that right there is a management tool that you should be aware of. Fans, wind, all of that stuff will help defend against screwworm fly in Zavala County, in Erath County. So if you have horses in a stall, put a fan on them. If you have somewhere that you can move air, move air. You see what I mean?
Yes, sir.
So Parks and Wildlife went to, again, King Ranch, Aransas National, all the coastal counties, and they started catching bucks and does and bringing them all over these different counties and turning them loose to restock post-screwworm. Post-screwworm means once they finally figured out the sterilization, where you
Sterilize,
irradiate the male and turn him loose, and then he outcompetes the native, or he overwhelms the native males. So he dies after he breeds. He just falls over dead. He's kind of a one-shot wonder, one and done, and dies. What a miserable existence, but that's how he rolls. And then the female, she lives for, I think, around 2 weeks, give or take, 12, 14 days, looking for a host. Again, anything that bleeds, that has some kind of opening, and it doesn't have to be a wound. It could be your mouth, your eyes, your nose, your anus. So any kind of opening in.
So that's a question I didn't ask Dr. Lansford. I'm glad you're going there. So it can be a natural orifice.
It can be a natural orifice, but they really prefer an injury.
Yeah.
So let's say you have
or an umbilical cord break on it. That's why they killed the fawns. Yeah, that's why they killed them.
That's the big obvious.
That's the big obvious.
Yeah, that's the big obvious. I should have mentioned that, and I failed to. But let's say you have a prolapse. Let's say you have a torn ear tag. You ripped your ear tag out. Yeah.
Big deal.
Or you just put your ear tag in yesterday. It's not healed yet, right? Around that tag itself is raw, bloody, oozy meat,
Sure.
right? A tick falls off. A tick gets pulled off. There is a microscopic hole there. There's a little hole there from the mouth parts of the tick, and that's all the female needs.
Yeah.
And if she's going to deposit her eggs, you look at the literature, it ranges from 100 to 300,000. I'm sure it has depending on the female fly, but the egg count is huge. And they put deposit her eggs. Well, then she dies. So now both adults are dead and gone.
Yeah.
But now those eggs pupate or morph into maggots. And as soon as they do that, they have to defend themselves. They have to feed themselves, and they start eating living flesh. They're one of the only animals that do that. Thank the Lord, right? So all the other flies, the house flies, the barn flies, the other maggots you've seen in your life involve death, decay, brown, dead stuff, trash, that kind of stuff, mold, that kind of stuff. But the screwworm only is attracted to living host. So they start burrowing into it. And the reason they're called screwworm is they have these giant fangs. They have these giant teeth. And they grab a holt and they pull themselves internal. They're looking to encapsulate their body as they eat, and they're just drilling into your body, muscle tissue. And remember, there's between 100 and 300,000 of them, right? She's laid, I've seen different numbers, but she's laid a lot of eggs, and all of them, they're being morphed at roughly the same time. So you've got all these different maggots drilling into your body, wherever that orifice that she found is, and they're eating you alive. So you as the host animal, it's driving you crazy, right? You're not acting normal. You're not, you're itching, you're burning. It's like having water in your ear, but much worse, right? You're trying to get that sensation out of your, so you'll see these animals acting unnatural. You'll see these animals rubbing their head or rubbing their butt or getting in water, doing really neurotic kind of stuff. So that's your first sign that something's wrong. Why is that deer out there? Why is that cow out there shaking its head and rubbing its head? All day long it's been rubbing its head on that post. you probably need to go check into that pretty dadgum quickly, because it's being eaten from the inside out, if you would. So it may be a little hole on the outside where the egg sac got in, but now there's going to be, at this point, now there's going to be a cavity or a cavern or a big hole on the inside that you can't see or you may not see. So they're literally eating this animal alive. So let's just say, move on down the progression, the animal dies, falls over, eventually dies. Well, those maggots, as the body cools down, those maggots say, hey, I got to abandon ship.
They leave.
Yeah, the Titanic is sinking. I got to get off this thing.
The hornfly maggots are coming in now.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, stage 2, the cleanup crew is coming in behind me, and I'm really tired of all these buzzards and all this. I got to get out of here. So they crawl out of the wound, and they fall to the ground, and then there's going to be some level of soil or dirt or leaf material, and they're going to burrow into the top 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch of soil. It just depends on all the makeup. And there they go into the next phase. And what that phase is turning into an adult, an actual fly, and they fly away. And so a dead animal reproduces or causes the next generation of flies. So it's really important that wildlife managers understand.
So that maggot, how long will that maggot live inside the host if the host doesn't die? Do you know?
As long as you can keep that animal alive. I mean, they're going to eat it to the point where the animal does die.
Yeah.
I mean, without treatment. Without treatment.
Yeah, from
that
infection,
animal
it's going to die from something.
It's going to die. Yeah, because they're going to start, let's just say it's on the shoulder. They're going to start rubbing that shoulder raw. They're going to rub the hair off. They're going to rub a bigger sore. And guess what the bigger sore does? Attract more females.
More flies, yeah.
So it's not like one single female lays her eggs and then that cow's done. Once that opening is expanded, and then don't forget there's pheromones, there's smells that flies communicate with.
That's what they're well known as. The smells awful, they say.
That's it. So they put out the text message, hey, we've got a live one over here, guys. So maybe 10 more female screwworm flies come in and bombard that enlarged, opened, that the first one's created. Well, now there's 4, 5, 6 more females dropping all these eggs that we're talking about. See what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So the numbers get exponentially large extremely quick because the pheromones, the scent, the stench attracts additional females. So it's not one female and she's done and the cow's done. It could be numerous females, which turns into hundreds or more maggots eating this animal. So left untreated, they're probably not going to live that long. So I don't know the answer to your question because it depends on where they got hit.
Yeah.
If it's in the navel, if it's in the head, they're not going to live long at all.
Yeah.
But let's say it's on the hip. Let's say it's the lower leg. Well, they could probably live a while, right?
Yeah.
But if you're going to go inside the body cavity, by the navel, or you're going to go in the head by the ear, or an old bull rubs a forehead spot, that animal's dead really, really quick.
So on the wildlife side, we can talk a little bit. We already addressed the deer fawns. The fawns are obviously very, very vulnerable. And so is the doe right there at the point of giving birth too, because she's going to be torn or potentially prolapsed a little bit. Then you've got the bucks that are rubbing off velvet. If it gets in the velvet, I guess it could continue down into the pedicle. If they got in the velvet's falling off and dying anyway.
I don't know this for a fact, but I would assume they would just follow that antler all the way down to the living tissue, right? Because the velvet is living tissue until they rub it off.
Correct.
Now it's no longer living tissue. So if that fly's in the area, they're going to continue down the trail, if you would. They're going to follow the main beam to that pedicle. And that pedicle is porous. You know what I mean? You can put your fingernail underneath the antler, the burr of the antler and above the skull.
Oh, yeah.
So that is an opening, and then, of course, in that throes of rubbing the velvet off, did he get a scratch? Yes, they often do because they're fighting. They're rubbing really hard.
Scratches on their forehead, cut their ears.
Is he rubbing on a weesatch? Is he rubbing on a locust tree? Is he rubbing on barbed wire fence? Yeah, yes, all the above. He's going to get a cut, a nick on the back of his ear, on the front of his nose.
Yeah, doe jumps a fence, they scrape their underline, all of it.
All of it, yeah. Inside their back
bucks
leg.
Fighting, stab each other.
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah, the nilgai, I've hunted nilgai bunch. They've got
full of scars.
big old scars.
Yeah, you're talking about street fight.
The aoudad sheep are the same way, just cut up here, and then you get in the aoudad, and the aoudad live around the desert bighorn, and there's when Texas Parks Wildlife will get involved. That's going to hurt them in their pocket, so that's when they'll get involved.
Right. Yeah. What's left
Outside
of
of
the desert bighorn?
Outside of that, I hesitate to say, but they're probably not going to have a lot of
That's right.
solutions for the white-tailed deer.
If you're following the desert bighorn, just to distract real quick, myobe, the pneumonia, and all that stuff, it literally has cut the desert bighorn population in half.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's ever a terrible time for screwworm, which is any time, but if you're a desert bighorn sheep, when you're less than 50% of your population 2 years ago, and now you introduce a flesh-eating flying insect, I don't like the odds. So
Good thing about them, they do spend most of their time in pretty windy climates at high altitude.
That's right. Yeah, up high and pretty rugged. Yeah. And they still have some cool weather, and those flies slow down. They're inactive, and that kind of stuff.
We have so many more hosts though than we had in the 50s and 60s. Feral hogs, nilgai antelope, all the exotics, the pure numbers of white-tailed deer, the aoudad sheep. Just so many more hosts.
That's right.
That travel.
That's right. Mobile host. And then, even trailers, trucks and trailers. And we as humans, we're so mobile, and we take all of our animals with us, including pets. Mm-hmm. How many dogs are in the back of a pickup here today? Thousands.
A whole bunch,
right?
yeah.
And tomorrow they'll be in San Saba at the cattle auction. They'll be, you know what I mean? So there'll be a dog in Del Rio that'll be in Stephenville tomorrow morning. Mm-hmm. And so you got to be thinking about that. We're a very mobile species now, and we can drive 85 miles an hour down the road. We can be somewhere quick.
What do you think the real risk is to the deer industry in Texas? You and I have talked about this earlier, and didn't want to scare people, but I think it's important to take this deal very seriously.
I agree, and I don't know that the sky's falling, and I don't want to be the Debbie Downer, but I also am not pleased with some of the literature where the other agencies have been real careful to say it's not here, we got it under control, we're organized and we're planned. To me, that gives a false sense of security to a lot of people. They read that, and they take it into heart, and they're like, oh, I don't have anything to worry about. They have it under control. They have it covered. I believe that that's a false sense of security. I believe that we should talk about the facts like we're doing today, and talk about worst case scenarios so that we're aware of it, so that we can respond to a worst case scenario. Mm-hmm. I would love to be wrong, and I will be the first person to come back here and tell you, I'm glad we were wrong. I'm glad I screwed up. I'm glad we were wrong. I'm going to be the first person to be here, come back and tell you, I am so happy I was wrong. But in that regard, I think that there should be a little bit more urgency. I think there should be a little bit more, not scariness, but there needs to be more factual conversations to say, hunting is about a $9 to $12 billion business in the Texas economy, and if screwworm gets out of control, we could lose it in a couple of months. That's a little bit different conversation than what you've been having and reading with people. You see what I mean? So to answer your question, again, the sky is not falling. I don't want to run out of here hollering in the streets. But I think that people need to take this a little bit more serious, and they need to be aware of what it could get to. And we're not hyperboling. We're not scaring the hell out of people just to get a clickbait. That's not what this is about. I promise you that's not what this is about. This is about reality. And we have seen this happen before. So it's not science fiction. We're not making this up.
No.
We're not dreaming this up, Kasey. We already know how the book could end. We've read the book. We've seen the book. There's still people that have wrote the book alive today that can sit in this chair and tell you in great detail, graphic detail, what to expect. So we know how the movie and the book ends if we allow it. But thank the Lord that we have more technology, we have more knowledge, we have more experience, and we are better prepared than they were originally. Those poor guys originally, they had no options. There was no treatment. They had to figure it out.
100% reaction.
100% reaction.
Dr. Lansford estimated 10 years to deal with this once it's here.
And that should be printed on billboards.
I agree.
That should scare the hell out of everybody.
Yeah, can you imagine the
10 years.
the feeds? I mean, you look at the feed stores throughout central Texas Hill Country where cattle numbers are way down because of land fragmentation, cow prices, all the things. Cattle numbers are way down. So the majority of their business is horses and wildlife. And they're selling deer blinds and deer feeders and deer feed and deer corn. And that's a big part of their business.
Big.
You take out a large percentage of the deer, what happens to your local feed store? Then you go to the family ranchers who lease their property out for $10 to $25 an acre to recreational hunters out of the Metroplex that come out and spend their recreational money on leasing your ranch. Plus they go purchase a side-by-side at the ATV dealer and they buy some blinds and they buy some feeders and they're going to Cabela's or the gun store and they're buying guns and they're buying bows every year. You see the economic trickle of this deal?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's huge.
So I think
it's
that should be the billboard.
It is potentially huge. It scares me that, because the large percentage of the ranches that we sell around the state of Texas and the stuff that we participate with out of the state, most of what I work on is wildlife related stuff.
That's right. Recreational
Most
properties.
of it is recreational properties and hunting is the biggest interest.
100%.
Yeah, second would be horses, and then third would be cattle. I'd love for more to be cattle. That's just not the reality today.
Right.
And so there's some recreational ranching goes on too, but majority of them have a very, very heavy hunting focus. And you look at the size of the hunting economy with respect to ATVs, side-by-sides, deer blinds, deer feed, guns, bows, broadheads, knives, camo. Holy moly.
Motel.
Yeah. And
cafes.
Yeah. Are you scared yet?
Right.
It scares me.
Yeah. And that's the message. I think that you answered your own question. I think we should be a little more reality based about it. And I think that it's
very different than the ag economy because, again, agriculture, you can manage it. You can put your hands on them.
That's right.
There will likely be labeled products. So the screwworm, let me talk a little bit more about the biology of the fly. The screwworm fly is very different than the horn fly. I learned all this from Dr. Lansford. And again, listeners, you do yourself a favor and go back and listen to that episode with Dr.
I agree.
T.R. Lansford. It's very good. He explains what I'm going to hit on here briefly. Your horn flies live around the manure. Okay, so in my horse stalls, and when I go in the horse stalls, there's horn flies all over the ground. That's just your regular old flies around your livestock. They're all over the ground. They're all over the manure piles. They're on the horse's legs and all this stuff. Very different behavior than a screwworm. The screwworms spend their time on plants until they smell the wound. They come inspect the wound. They lay their larvae there. So spraying my horse stalls every day is not going to hurt. It's general fly control, but I'm likely not killing the screwworm fly by spraying my manure piles and doing that. So it's a harder fly to control. It's different than spraying your cows for, coming by your cows with permethrin and spraying your flies' backs with permethrin. It's different than that because the flies are not living on the adult screwworm fly.
Over there.
They're over there in the brush somewhere.
Yeah.
They're not living on the backs of the cows. They're not in and around the livestock all day. The live fly is not like the horn fly is, like your common fly is. And so treating the fly is different. The other thing is, I'm sure Texas Animal Health Commission and USDA will approve labeled treatment, feed-throughs, injectables, pour-ons, sprays for livestock. Texas Parks and Wildlife is not likely to approve those things for indigenous native wildlife, namely white-tailed deer.
Right. Myself and several others.
So treatment becomes really, it almost becomes impossible. You almost have to let the ag community treat it and let the government release the flies, and that almost becomes if you're operating within label.
Right. And that's the key. The labels are so specific, too specific, and they purposely exclude wildlife.
Yeah.
So the wildlife person, his options are pretty short because there's nothing, quote, approved, labeled for it. So if you do use anything that's out there for cattle, sheep, and goat guys, it's off label. Mm-hmm. So that's against a bunch of rules, regulations, federal law, that kind of stuff for commercial development. So so a feed manufacturer can't go put it in a pellet.
Yeah, they can't make the only two that I'm aware of, is ivermectin and Dectomax are the only two that I'm aware of that have efficacy against the screwworm. And so if you worm your cows with ivermectin, they have some immunity to those maggots for a period of time. I don't know what the efficacy period is. Dectomax, same thing. The challenge is neither one of those are very palatable. And so you could feed a feed through to horses and cattle, which is manure activated. So they eat the pellet. It passes through them when they defecate on the ground. That manure activates, and that will kill the hornfly larva, not the screwworm.
Right.
Not the screwworm. And ivermectin and Dectomax are not very palatable, so it's hard to get them to eat it. So even if you were to go, if it were to be labeled a deer feed that had those in it, which they won't do, but if you were to get a deer feed that was legal to feed in the pasture to wild deer, it would have to have Dectomax or ivermectin in it, right?
Right. Either or. One of them works slightly better than the other. Now, the half-life of ivermectin is 2.8 days. So oral. So if you're giving animals, like to your point, you're treating corn and you give it to an animal orally, the half-life is 2.8 days. That's
What's half-life mean? What does that mean?
That means it's efficacy, basically. Okay. So by the end of, when you double that, so what is that, 5 days? At the end of 5 days, there's not enough ivermectin left in the body to defend itself against screwworm.
Okay.
So to answer your question, if you're going to treat corn with ivermectin orally to white-tailed deer, you need to do it every 5 days.
Got it.
That's the answer. So then, does that become possible? Labor, financial, that kind of stuff.
Just availability of ivermectin pour on.
Yeah, we should have bought stock in that about 3 days ago. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'm sure there's a run on that stuff. Now, Dectomax works a little bit better, has a little more longer, better half-life. But the thing about Dectomax over ivermectin is it bonds to corn. In particular, it bonds to corn. It's got a little more stick-to-itedness. Glycol, I can't remember the fancy name, but anyway, there's a chemical there that allows it to. Whereas the ivermectin has a little bit more water, and the water is subject to evaporation. Now, one thing about ivermectin, if you treat corn and you spray it on the road, and this is really important for managers to understand this, that UV light, ultraviolet light, breaks down the molecules in the ivermectin. So if you're going to treat corn, you're going to treat alfalfa, you're going to treat cottonseed, just know that when you put it out there, the ultraviolet light immediately starts breaking it down from a molecular level. So if you're going to use it, put it out late in the evening. So like during the day right now, go out there and make your batches and do all your witchcraft and do all your mixing, but keep it in the barn in the shade or under the shade tree, but put it out tonight. So put it out tonight, this evening, in a road feeder, drive all your roads so that the corn's out there this evening all night long and in the morning out of direct sunlight until, let's just say, 9:30 in the morning. So the corn's laying on the road for, 14 hours, so that you're increasing your availability to all those other animals we talked about.
Everything that's
rats, rabbits, mice, quail, turkey, rah.
Yeah.
And then
hogs,
right now,
even the hogs is all of it. Yeah, they're all hosts.
A dead hog is going to mass produce more screwworms. So we are concerned about feral hogs, javelinas. How many ranches in South Texas have javelinas? I don't know the hard answer, but I can tell you it's a lot. It's a whole lot. So we need to medicate our javelinas because, again, they're just going to help produce more adult flies. So put this ivermectin-treated stuff out in the evening so that it lays there longer and it's more exposure to more animals. But direct sunlight interferes with the molecular composition of ivermectin. And Dectomax will last a little longer, but Dectomax is not as common. It's not as readily available.
Yeah.
And then there's some discussions to have about injectable versus liquid pour-on. Now, the injectable is better, but it's more expensive. Smaller volume. You put it out in cc's versus ounces. You see what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
So you got to be careful. So ivermectin is not ivermectin is not ivermectin. You need to understand, is it injectable ivermectin or is it oral liquid ivermectin. And so that's a different animal. So you need to make sure that you understand that, because they need to be treated a lot different. So the oral application will work. It's just as effective as the injectable, however, the dosage rate is not 1x. It's not 1-to-1. So in other words, if somebody tells you the dosage to give your animal of injectable ivermectin, it's not comparable if you're going to do it orally.
Sure. Yeah.
It starts at 2x. So let's just say, for example, let's just talk about a real number. So I say, Kasey, you need to give your horse, 3 cc's of injectable. And
Well, ivermectin's 1 cc to 100 weight. So you have 300-pound, like at the feed store this morning, they got ivermectin bottles. I had to get some horse wormer anyway. So I was looking right there, and it's 1 mil per 100 weight for cattle and swine, injectable ivermectin. Okay.
So that's injectable.
Yep, that's injectable.
But all you have now, because you didn't buy that this morning, you messed up. So you go back after the podcast to buy it, and all they have is liquid.
They're gone.
Yeah, you screwed up, dude. You missed the boat. That ship is done sailed. So all they have is Poron.
Yeah.
And you thought, well, heck, he just told me 1 cc per 100 weight. Well, that's not the case, because now you're dealing with a different delivery.
Yeah.
So it's at least 2x, and in some cases it's 3x. So oral is just as effective as injectable, but you've got to adjust the dosage, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you just got, like I say, there's a lot of information on the internet and Facebook. You just got to be real careful about, are you talking about injectable or are you talking about liquid Poron?
Yeah.
Same drug, but the dosage is radically different. So just heads up on that.
You mentioned some stuff earlier about like mass fogging permethrin in the pastures. Certainly if you have deer pens, fans on the side of the deer pens.
Right.
Like you might see at a vineyard where it's used to blow the dew in the mornings out. I think you will see some people that put fans, just like we have fans in our barns, horse barns, cattle barns, dairy barns. You have fans, hog barns, you have fans, keep air moving, keep the flies moving. You could have fans to blow that permethrin through on some rotation, and that's it. And permethrin's an insecticide. If you see bug spray, most of bug sprays are permethrin.
Yeah.
So you'll have that. You're obviously going to have some non-target kill there for sure to be concerned with.
For sure.
Yeah, you will have some non-target if you do that. But I'm just wondering what wildlife managers can do, Macy, at the moment.
Yeah. So let's just revert back, talk about the breeder deer, those guys that are holding those white-tailed deer in captivity under special permit. They've been fogging and insecticizing their pens for years.
Yeah, those guys are going to be okay here.
Right.
Yeah.
But so we can learn from that.
Yeah.
So you could have a manual handheld fogger, kind of looks like a leaf blower. It's got a little tank. You can pour permethrin in it, and you could get on the upwind side of your DMP pens, for example. So you're not fogging the deer, but you're fogging the pens. And again, you were just explaining the life cycle. That female fly hangs out in the plants. So you could fog the habitat of a DMP pen, for example. This morning I was on the phone talking about with drone sprayers. We are going to employ drone herbicide applications, again, over some pen situations, some high-value target areas. We're going to use drones to permethrin some of the habitat.
Insecticide, not herbicide.
Insecticide, that's right. Insecticide, that's right. Yeah. So we're going to throw the book at this thing, because I think it's all hands on deck. I don't think this is something we should sit back and let the government handle it, because their pretty brochure said they have it handled. Mm-hmm. You can't rely on somebody else to take care of your business, especially your huge financial.
10 hours before this confirmed case in Zavala County, there was a government representative said, this is all fear mongering, nothing to worry about. It's still south of the border. And then it shows up 45 miles.
How quickly things can change.
Yeah.
So, yeah, exactly. That's a great example. So while that conversation was being had, the other end of the spectrum was happening, and they didn't even know about it. That's cool. I understand. It's a big world. But, yeah, how quickly things can change. And that's to our earlier conversation about deer breeders wanting to get out of, or people getting away from whitetail, getting into exotics.
Yeah.
Is, again, because the situation, the scenario can be so fluid, it can literally change by the hour. So your 5-year written management plan is
now, if you have
hard.
exotics, let's move from whitetail and talk specifically about exotics. You could feed exotics a treated feed.
Yes, that's right. Yes, they're again
no
they're
different
classified
than
as
cattle,
livestock.
horses.
Yeah, they're livestock.
Yeah.
So
now
you
there'll be some labels for cattle for consumption, human consumption.
Yes.
Right. That's, if I'm understanding right, that's what the labels would deal with on cattle. Is if they're going into the food source, there's
withdrawal
periods and things.
Right.
That's what the labels will deal with.
Yeah. So you if you're a super exotic, super species, the higher dollar, you more than likely have a relationship, a working relationship with a veterinarian.
Yep.
And that in itself is extremely valuable. Yeah. And you can get exceptions, you can get prescriptions, you can get exceptions for off-label and what they call minor species. So stuff like you and I can't go down to the local Tractor Supply and say, hey, I've got, a pen full of Simmental horned oryx, and they sell you something legally. They can't do that legally. Yeah. But if you have a working relationship with a veterinarian, he can write you a prescription that is an exception to the rule. Let's say you have endangered species or something like that. Again, you're going to most likely have a working relationship already in place of a veterinarian, a wildlife veterinarian. And there's not very many of those folks.
There'll be some of the feed manufacturers make a feed that's right that you can purchase.
Right. And so you want to jump on that with both feet, and you want to get started immediately because again, it all works until it doesn't. And this fly apparently is going to be able to show up when we're least expecting it, because Zavala County, I measured it on my Onyx. I'm very familiar with that particular property, 45 miles inland. So, we were talking from the border. Yeah. So from the Rio Grande due east, I measured it on Onyx because I know the western fence line of the property we're talking about, 45 linear miles interior from the border. Now, I hesitate to even bring this up, but this morning I got a call from a couple of people that I deem reliable that also yesterday in Dilley, Texas, 4 other cases of suspected screwworm were gathered by veterinarians and sent to Ames, Iowa. So probably today or tomorrow we will know yes or no if that's
as far as Dilley from La Pryor.
I haven't measured that, hour and a half drive, but if you look at Dilley, Texas, it's central South Texas.
It's a lot further than 45 miles.
A lot further, yeah. So again, I'm not saying that this is going to come to fruition, and I hesitate to even bring it up here, but I think, we want to talk about reality. We want to talk about not scaring people, but informing people. So if all of a sudden it shows up 45 miles away near Batesville, and then the next day or two it's in Dilley, Texas, you might want to ratchet up your thinking and your preparedness, because I believe we need to take this a little more serious maybe than the general public has. Now, I know the agencies.
That is the isolated, solo, singular first case.
Yeah, we're not done. We're not done. I'm telling you right now, we're not done with this. If it shows up 45 miles away, we're not done. Unfortunately, we're not done. Yeah. So prepare yourself, educate yourself, and reality is amongst us. Reality is here. So you're going to have that uncomfortable conversation. So start buying the equipment, start talking to the ranch manager, start talking to the ranch foremans. What exactly are we going to do? How are we going to do it? How much time are we going to allot to it? And that's the reality of it. It's not fear-mongering at all. We're not hyperbole, but you should have that very uncomfortable conversation, maybe even with your neighbors.
Yeah.
It's time that neighbors join together, not fight across the high fence because they have different goals and objectives, because your neighbor is going to impact you. And that's something that we probably don't need to talk about much, because you and Dr. Langford did a great job, is the surveillance zones, the infestation zones.
Yeah, I heard those are going to be a 50-mile radius, which would be the quarantine zone for livestock. Now, I don't know what, I was going to ask you this. If it shows up in deer and you don't have livestock there, because there's a bunch of ranches that don't, they're destocked because of drought or just different goals. Is there going to be a quarantine zone there? You report to Texas Parks and Wildlife. They have a similar quarantine zone?
They're going to use the same playbook. And so it's going to be, they're talking about initially 20 miles, I think it is.
Okay.
20 miles. And then it can be, if it's, that, so it's on a particular case. So let's just talk about if this case in Zavala County was a deer. I know it's not, but let's just, we got to talk about it.
It was a baby calf.
Yeah, but let's say it was a white-tailed deer. Well, then 20 miles around the ranch in all directions is going to be their initial infestation zone. So all of the neighbors, all the ranches within 20 miles, they would have enhanced testing, fly trapping, enhanced monitoring, so that those animals would have to be subject to more testing. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
On the neighbor. Now, let's say they go out 19 miles and they find another one, in another white-tailed deer or feral hog. They're gonna do another 20-mile circle around that feral hog, for example, that was on the edge of the original one. And it's going to get to a point where it's going to continue to morph out, 20 miles, 20 miles. Well, after about the second or third extension, they're going to stop and they're going to do a regional extension. And they're going to go 124 miles. You need to look at that on a map. So if you're in Zavala County, let's say you're in Dilley. Let's just say worst case scenario. Again, no hyperbole, I'm not trying to scare anybody, but let's say Dilley pops 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 cases and we have to go 124 miles. That's north of San Antonio.
Yeah.
And again, it's roughly a circle, not exactly. They're going to use highways and some obvious borders, but for this conversation, just think of a 124-mile circle from Dilley north, Dilley south, Dilley east, Dilley west. What's that going to look like? It's going to encompass
The whole southern part of the state.
South Texas. That's right. What is that going to look like logistically? What's that going to look like financially? What is that going to look like to your lease hunters? You're making good money this year, and all of a sudden you're in this 124-mile zone.
What can you not do with them? I mean, we're not talking about trapping and transporting deer anyway. So just as a lease hunter, what's it do to me?
So a lease hunter, that if
Or
it
a
gets
package hunter, I go to South Texas to kill a deer. What's that do to me?
So they made, just like they did in the cattle fever tick, because they're following the same cattle fever tick response plan. And so in that case, you would have to freeze the hide. So if it's a trophy buck, you'd have to cape him or put this whole head in a freezer for like 48 hours and before you can leave the ranch. Now, the deer that aren't trophies, you can throw them in a pit and bury them or burn them. In other words, there's carcass disposal rules. Because again, remember what we're talking about. A carcass promotes more flies. A live animal doesn't at the moment because it's being eaten alive. But as soon as it falls over dead, it's a mass
it's when they go from larva to fly.
So they're going to say, okay, Kasey, you killed 20. Your hunters killed 20 does. So you got to go dig a pit and bury those does every time you put a doe in there. Well, I don't have a tractor. Okay, well, go get 2 shovels. Well, I'm in Sonora. I'm in Solid Rock. Okay, well, Kasey, pile them up and burn them.
Taylor, you could probably make a living digging holes for
That'd be a
deer.
great idea.
Yeah. That'd be good. Your arms will look great.
So you can get one of those mini excavators in your pickup, and you be the mobile disposal guy. So you just go around poking holes and burying dead stuff. So put some Vicks up your nose, put one of those COVID face masks on and show up with your mobile digging trench. And so, I mean, what's it going to look like? You should have those realistic conversations. So, it's going to be extremely disruptive.
I'd say so.
And what if people don't do it and they start illegally transporting carcasses? And you see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
So this thing, again, you just got to be prepared for reality. And I think that we're not been very prepared for reality. So I think it's a wake-up call. I think we should. And I think this conversation is worth having. And I appreciate you bringing it up because not a lot of people have talked about the possibilities. And again, I will come up here next year and say, Kasey, I can't believe I was that wrong. I feel stupid, but I'm
Hopefully
sure glad I'm wrong. Yeah, I hope I'm the wrongest person.
I've never been sad to be overly prepared.
I want to be the wrongest guy in Texas.
Yeah.
I really do. I want to look back on this in a year and laugh about it.
Well, Macy, I appreciate you coming up very much. We've been 2.5 hours talking about some huge issues, definitely facing our state. All of that said, it's a great time to be a Texas landowner.
Yes, sir.
And I think the experiment of wildlife management in the state of Texas is unrivaled anywhere in the world.
Yes, sir.
I think the professionalism that we have here, the results that we've had here, the science we've proven here, and the benefits to our landowners in the state of Texas, it's unrivaled anywhere in the world.
I agree with that.
So I appreciate you and the people that do such a good job. I appreciate our clients that invest in it and keep you and I employed. And
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It's an honor to
with or without screwworm. Yeah. I got to throw that in there. Yeah.
With or without screwworms.
We build ponds and we catch fish too.
That's it. That's exactly right. And this will create other opportunities for other people, and that's just the truth of it. And we'll evolve. We'll make it through. So, We appreciate you. Where can people follow Spring Creek? Are y'all on social media or anything?
Yes, sir. No, I appreciate that opportunity. So the name of the company is Spring Creek Outdoors, and we're both on the Instagram, Facebook, and of course the website.
Okay.
So we do a little bit of Facebook. We're not huge on it, but we do a little bit of, or social media, I should say. But yeah, check us out, springcreekoutdoors.com. We have 2 other biologists. So myself, my son Wade, he lives in Mason. We have Matt, he lives in Poth, kind of south of San Antonio, I guess you'd say, southeast, and my wife. So it's a family operation, a family of 4, 3-degree biologists, and then my wife works behind the scenes, much like yours, and keeps us all looking smart, does all the minutia behind the behind the scenes, so we can stay on the front lines. And we do geospatial mapping and
all
fisheries,
sorts of things.
Everything, tax plans. I mean, just pretty much anything that's ranch related.
A great podcast. You were on Austin Praden's Drop Time Studios podcast about a month ago.
Yes, sir.
And it was really good. So if y'all want to go see the fun stuff that Macy does, not just disease and parasite control. Right. If you want to if you want to listen to like really legitimate high-end wildlife management, the fun parts of it, animal husbandry, wildlife management, the results-oriented stuff, I'd encourage you to go listen to Austin's podcast with Macy, Drop Time Studios, because y'all did a great job talking about the fun parts of it.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. And I want to kudos to you as well as Austin. I listen to both of y'all's podcasts religiously because I can't wait, because the way y'all both structure this is 100% education.
Has to be.
Not entertainment.
Yeah.
I don't listen to, nor can I stand, a single podcast that's based on entertainment. But I will listen to anything that's education, because we learn every day, and we don't know it all. But I want to, my hat's off to you, and the scope and the diversity of your interviewees. It's been wonderful, and so sometimes it's out of my bailiwick, it's out of my comfort zone. But I listen because I learn every day, and particularly Section 80 stuff you had on recently.
That's pretty good, wasn't it?
I took about 2 pages of handwritten notes. I'm not going to lie to you. I know about Section 80, but I don't know the level of that. Yeah. So that was very good. But anyway,
that's why I do it. If nobody listens, I'm learning.
Right. But no, again, hats off to you specifically. Thanks. You're doing a great job of talking about ranching and managing ROI and bottom line and spreadsheets. Man, that's stuff that has to be talked about. It may not be the entertainment value that somebody's looking for, but from the educational value, the professionalism, owning ranches, selling ranches, holding that land for the next generation, you have to understand that. You have to be aware of it. The things that the wildlife partners are doing, that's critical. Whether you know about exotics or want to use exotics, you need to be aware of the tools. The tax code is ridiculous. And so, the points that have been brought out on this podcast about the tax code, and not just the tax code, but the specific numbers and page number and
what to go ask your CPA.
Exactly. And if the CPA doesn't know, fire their ass and go get one that does. Yeah, go get another. I mean, that's good stuff, brother. That's not hyperbole. Fire their ass in them pack and go get one that does.
Right.
Yeah. So that is reality. That's raw reality. And my hat's off to you. And so I appreciate you for inviting me here. It's good to be back in Stephenville, Texas. And I appreciate everything you're doing, and keep it up, brother.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
That wraps us up. I appreciate you listening to the Landowner Insider. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to follow the show, leave us a review, and share it with another Texas landowner. For more insights, listings, and resources for Texas landowners, visit mockranches.com. Till next time, I'm Kasey Mock, your host. This has been the Landowner Insider. Go get 'em.